Good evening. Welcome to the Agoura Hills City Council meeting. This meeting is being conducted in person in the council chambers and also by utilizing video conferencing. Please silence all cell phones and other electronic devices and do not access Zoom during the live meeting as it will cause interference with the audiovisual system in the council chambers. Tonight's meeting may be viewed on the Zoom via the link on the agenda by live stream on YouTube by entering the Agoura Hills City Council meeting in your browser and clicking on the link for June 28, 2023, or view the live or archive meeting on the city's website at agourahillscity.org and click on the Watch Meetings Online button. I will now defer to the city clerk.
Thank you, Mayor Anstead. There will be an opportunity for the public to speak on any item listed on the agenda. Any person in the council chambers who wishes to speak or submit a written comment is requested to complete a comment card for each item and submit to the city clerk prior to the public comment portion of the item. Comments submitted at the meeting will be provided to the city council for review and filed with the official record. For any person participating remotely, written public comments were requested to be emailed by 4 p.m. today and distributed to the city council in advance of the meeting. To request to speak during public comment, please click on the raise hand button on the Zoom toolbar. Request to speak must be received prior to the mayor closing the public comment portion of the item. Public testimony for all speakers is limited to 3 minutes per speaker. Written public comments will not be read aloud by the city clerk. For full details, please refer to the public participation section on the agenda. Thank you.
Thank you. I will now call the meeting to order, and I will defer to Mayor Pro Tem Buckley Weber to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Thank you. Before we take a roll call vote, I would like to defer to Councilmember Lopez for a statement.
Thank you so much, Mr. Mayor, and good evening, council members. This is Councilmember Deborah Klein Lopez. Pursuant to Assembly Bill 2449, which allows teleconferencing in certain limited circumstances, I'm stating the basis of my remote participation request for just cause, as I have a contagious illness. There are 0 individuals 18 years of age or older present in the room with me at my remote location, and I will be participating remotely this evening with my video camera on and microphone when deliberating. So thank you.
Thank you. I will now defer to the city clerk for a roll call vote.
Good evening. Councilmember Lopez?
Here.
Councilmember Sylvester?
Here.
Councilmember Wolf?
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Buckley Weber?
Here.
Mayor Anstead?
Here.
Mayor Anstead, you have a quorum.
Thank you very much. Now defer to the city attorney Lee for the report of closed session.
Thank you, Mayor. Direction was given to staff. No reportable action taken this evening. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll now move to the approval of the agenda. Will the maker of the motion and a second to approve the agenda please state your names?
This is Councilmember Wolf. I'll make a motion to approve the agenda.
Thank you.
Councilmember Sylvester seconds.
Thank you. I'll now defer to the city clerk for a roll call vote.
Councilmember Lopez?
Aye.
Councilmember Sylvester?
Aye.
Councilmember Wolf?
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Buckley Weber?
Aye.
Mayor Anstead?
Aye.
Mayor Anstead, you have approval 5-0.
Thank you. There are no presentations this evening. I'm now going to move straight to the Intergovernmental Special Purpose Committee and departmental reports. I actually wanted to call up and defer to the President and CEO, Daniel Bourget, to present from the Greater Conejo Valley Chamber of Commerce.
I wanted to provide the council with our monthly report from the chamber. A couple of recaps on programs we've held recently. We had a spotlight breakfast with Mayor Anstead attended at the Courtyard by Marriott in Agoura Hills. We brought together a variety of different healthcare leaders as well as some nonprofits in our community, including UCLA Health, SCOE, Los Robles, and YMCA. We also held our annual Mixpo, which is our expo, as well as our largest mixer of the year at Los Robles Greens in Thousand Oaks. We had over 40 businesses participate as exhibitors, and about 200 attendees attend that event earlier this month. Last week, we released our names of 40 under 40 for our honorees, including a special shout out for Katrina Garcia from the city of Agoura Hills. We also had honorees from Agoura Hills organizations, including Smiths and Associates, Homewood Suites Agoura Hills, Los Angeles County Fire, and LA County Sheriff Department. We will be holding our honoree reception on July 21st at the Hyatt, and we hope you all can join us in recognizing our young professionals this year. We are currently accepting applications for our next cohort of the Leadership Conejo program, which starts in September. And on the tourism front, 2 recent partnerships. We had an influencer come out for the Wild Oaks Country Music Festival that was held on June 3rd in Thousand Oaks. We brought out a gentleman named Peter Weber. You may have known him from The Bachelor. He has over 1.4 million followers and is from the Conejo Valley originally. He did some stories for us prior to the festival, and his reel of the festival had over 250,000 views. And then we are working on a mini campaign for the X Games that is coming to Ventura at the end of July. And we have a dedicated landing page. We actually have 2 influencers in the area currently who are skateboarders. And between the 2 of them, they have over 2 million TikTok followers. And a very different audience for us from a tourism district standpoint. So they've been doing some really interesting content for us these last 2 days. And then we also did some paid emails, one with Visit California, and then one that was specifically targeted and also with the interests with the sports aligning with X Games. So that was over 250,000 emails paid that went to as well. So we're really trying to reap the benefits of the X Games, which is expected to bring about 50,000 people into the Ventura County area to really get them out of the crowds and let them have access to the games while getting some fresh air. And that is my report, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. Any questions from any council members? What's up there? Sure, Mayor Pro Tem Buckley, whatever.
Couple of questions. Thank you for being here tonight. The 40 under 40, you said that was on the July 21st. Is that in the evening at the Hyatt?
It is.
Okay, great. And the X Games are when?
They are July 21st through the 23rd, I believe.
If there's anything we can do to help generate business in the area, let us know. Thank you very much.
And just a quick comment. I also want to include that our Agoura Hills Planning Commissioner, Morgan Roth, was selected for 40 under 40 as well.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it for that great update. I'm now going to move to an update for the Las Virgenes Malibu Council of Governments from Councilmember Sylvester.
Thank you. We approved the budget for 23-24 year, which was great. We also extended the contract for Gabriel Graham, our homeless outreach coordinator. I think we all agree that he's doing a wonderful job and really supporting our cities and those unfortunate persons who are homeless at this point. He does a really good job. The other thing, Jen Situ, captain at the Lost Hills Sheriff Station, reported that she's been meeting about the drones with the Civilian Oversight Committee to discuss policies for their use in search and rescue, disaster, traffic collisions. She says that the drones can save up to 4 hours in reopening roads just because they can give the big overview of what's happening. So she's really looking forward to having that, when she gets the final approval. Let's see. Senator Ben Allen is going to be attending the Liberty Canyon 4th of July parade, and I believe everybody's welcome. So I recommend you attend that if you would like to. And then we just went into closed session to discuss the salary for Terry, who's the executive director. And that was it. So short meeting.
Thank you for the update. Any questions from the council members? No? Okay, thank you very much. Are there any reports from staff before we move forward? Any other reports? All right, any other reports from City Council? Sure, Mayor Pro Tem Buckley.
Yes, I just want to share because you may hear about this, but as you know, I'm the vice chair on the Environmental Policy Committee for Cal Cities, and we had our first in-person meeting in June, and there were 2 bills that the Cal Cities board wanted to know how we felt on them. I turned to staff, which was wonderful because it was kind of late in the game, but they were able to give me guidance that I could indeed vote because it fell within our legislative platform under environmental and water quality issues. However, both of these bills, one of the big risk of the passage of these bills, and it's AB 460 and AB 1337, was that it would take away local control and give control to the Water Resources Board, State Water Resources Board. So I just want you to know that I voted against because our legislative platform is pro local control. So I voted against AB 460. The committee, though, approved supporting it. So you're going to hear that the Environmental Quality Policy Committee supported AB 460. That's their recommendation to Cal Cities, but I want you to know that I did not support that. And on AB 1337, the group just took a neutral position. So that's, just wanted to report that to you so you'll know in case you hear about it from someone. Like Mr. Councilmember Wolf might hear about it.
Yeah, and AB 460 has been a very controversial bill. It was pulled by the author yesterday, so it's not going to be getting a hearing, but 1337 will be getting a hearing July 10th.
Thank
it
you
has
for
a little
that
bit more
update.
broad support, but 460 not going forward this year.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for that great update. We will now move forward with public comments. This section is reserved for persons wishing to speak on items not listed on the agenda that are under subject matter jurisdiction of the City Council. For council chamber attendees, please submit a public comment card to the city clerk. For Zoom attendees, please click the raise hand button on the Zoom toolbar now. Public testimony is limited to 3 minutes per speaker, and a speaker's time may not be transferred to another speaker. Persons addressing the council shall not engage in disorderly conduct that disrupts or otherwise impedes the orderly conduct of the meeting. We respectfully request that if you have something to distribute to the council, you hand it to our city clerk and do not approach the dais. I will now defer to the city clerk for public comments.
Thank you, Mayor Anstead. We did not receive any written public comments. However, we do have an in-person comment card. Gary Hartung? Yes. If you'd like to step up to the podium, you'll have 3 minutes. Thank you.
Okay, you folks probably don't remember me, but I was here about 9 months ago complaining about the pool temperature at the LA Fitness Center down the road here when it was 88 degrees for a whole year. Now it's going the other way. For 4 weeks, it's been 74 degrees. That is just freezing. 4 months ago, when all of a sudden they put a notice on the front desk there that the water heater was broken, I said, okay, things break down. But the manager told me several times, yeah, it's a part that we need, and within a week, we're going to get the part. Well, now, it's been an entire month, and they haven't fixed it. They're just jerking everybody's chain, and hardly anybody will go swimming in that pool. You're just freezing to death. And it's just a bunch of bull crap from this company about why they can't get a part for the broken heater. And I'm tired of it. I'm 72 years old. I got one knee that's got arthritis in it, and the other one some days, acts up too. And I don't appreciate it when I'm forced to get my aerobics workout on the treadmill and or the Stairmaster. There's plenty of places around the area here where they can get their part to fix the pool's heater. Secondly, there's a bunch of crap going on with the Stairmasters and the treadmills over there. Most of the treadmills work, but many of them they all have televisions. And that's supposed to be part of the amenities you get when you pay your membership. That's why I started there about 2 years ago. Now you get these this no signal when you want to watch the television shows. They won't fix that. It's been going on for months. And the same thing on the Stairmasters. They got 7 of them. 3 of them are busted. And on 2 of the remaining 4, the television screens don't work. We're getting screwed. You could do something about it because apparently when I was here 9 months ago, 1 to 2 days later after I spoke, you folks did something because the pool temperature went from 88 down to 82 degrees. Thank you very much. My knees appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Appreciate your comments.
Thank you. We have no further comments. I'll defer to staff for any remote participants.
Good evening, Mayor Anstead. No hands are raised to speak on this item.
Thank you very much. I'll now move to the consent calendar. This section is reserved for persons wishing to speak on items on the consent calendar. For council chamber attendees, please submit a public comment card to the city clerk. For Zoom attendees, please click the raise hand button on the Zoom toolbar now. Public testimony is limited to 3 minutes per speaker, and a speaker's time may not be transferred to another speaker. We respectfully request that if you have something to distribute to the council, you hand it to our city clerk and do not approach the dais. I will now defer to the city clerk.
Thank you, Mayor Anstead. No written public comments have been received and no speaker cards have been submitted. I'll now defer to staff for any remote participants.
Thank you, Mayor Anstead. No hands are raised to speak on this item.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions from the city council on the consent calendar? None? No, not seeing any. I will now call for a motion and a second to adopt the consent calendar. Do I have a motion?
Councilmember Sylvester so moves.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
Councilmember Buckley Weber seconds the motion.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I will now defer to the city clerk for a roll call vote.
Councilmember Lopez?
Aye.
Councilmember Sylvester?
Aye.
Councilmember Wolf?
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Buckley Weber?
Aye.
Mayor Anstead?
Aye.
Mayor Anstead, you have approval, 5-0.
Thank you very much. Our next item on the agenda is a budget discussion action item. It's a discussion to consider the adoption of resolution number 23-2037, amending the compensation plan, and resolution number 23-2038, increasing the employer contribution to healthcare premiums for council members, and to consider the approval of the third amendment to the city manager's employment agreement and performance bonus. I will now defer to Assistant City Manager Ramiro Adavia for presentation.
All right, thank you so much. And good evening, Honorable Mayor and members of the council. Each year in June, there is typically an item brought before the council to discuss proposed amendments to compensation and benefit plans. This year, staff is seeking approval on the following. First, it is being recommended that the compensation plan for full-time employees be amended to include a 6% COLA rate increase, an increase of employer contribution to healthcare premiums from $2,500 per month to $2,625 per month, effective on January 1st, 2024, an increase in the city's matching contribution to the deferred compensation plan to a dollar-for-dollar match not to exceed $100 per pay period, and to establish the position of Human Resources Manager along with the classification, specification, and salary range. Second, it is also being recommended that the city contribution to healthcare premiums for council members be increased to match the recommended contribution for full-time employees from $2,500 per month to $2,625 per month, also effective on January 1st, 2024. The other recommendation is to approve the third amendment to the city manager's employment agreement and a performance bonus. SB 1436, which went into effect in January of 2017, amended the Brown Act to require that prior to taking final action on the operating budget, An oral report must be provided summarizing any changes in salaries, salary schedules, or fringe benefits for any executive management or employees on a contract. The non-representative management consists of the city manager, assistant city manager, the deputy city manager, building official, city clerk, and all the department heads. It should be noted that other than the aforementioned executive management positions, the city does not have any other employees on a contract that fall within the SB 1436 reporting requirement. Although the following information may seem redundant, stating it is necessary to comply with SB 1436. So for fiscal year 2023-24, the benefit package before the City Council includes a 6% COLA increase. Additionally, the maximum limit of employer contribution to health insurance will increase from $2,500 per month to $2,625 per month, effective January 1st, 2024. The classic employee contribution is 3.1%, and the PEPRA employee contribution is 7.75%. The recommended action for the city manager is that his employment agreement be amended to include a 5% increase in pay, which would establish a base pay of $273,199.50 annually, an auto allowance of $500 per month, a 1% increase to the city's contribution to the city manager's 401A retirement savings plan, not to exceed 5% of the city manager's salary. Based on the city manager's continued exceptional performance, the city manager will be given a performance bonus of $10,000 for fiscal year 2023-24. Providing this information complies with the requirements of SB 1436, and that concludes staff report at this time. Thank you.
Thank you. Before we move on to public comment, does any council member have questions on the staff presentation? Written public comments were requested to be emailed in advance of tonight's meeting. If you wish to speak, please click the raised hand button on the Zoom toolbar now. Public testimony is limited to 3 minutes per speaker, and a speaker's time may not be transferred to another speaker. We respectfully request that if you have something to distribute to the council, you hand it to our city clerk and do not approach the dais. I will now defer to the city clerk.
Thank you, Mayor Anstead. No written public comments have been received. No speaker cards have been submitted. I'll now defer to staff for any remote participation.
Thank you, Mayor Anstead. No hands are raised to speak on this item.
Thank you very much. I'll first ask, does any council member have any questions again, just to make sure before we move into deliberations? All right, we'll now move on to deliberations, and why don't we start with Councilmember Lopez?
Thank you. Just so the public knows, this is a long conversation that we have with our city manager regarding his compensation as well as compensation for all of our employees. And so, we get to this agreement to make sure that our employees feel, rewarded with their good work, but also very fiscally responsible for our city. We are a very, very mighty team that does a lot with a very small staff. So with that, I'm ready to proceed with this item, with this contract.
Thank you very much. Mayor Pro Tem Buckley Weber.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I don't have a lot to add. Like Councilmember Lopez says, all year we talk about goals that the council has set, and the staff keeps us updated. They work nonstop to make sure that they meet the goals. And when I tell you the goals of 5 council members is quite significant. So we do really appreciate the work that they do. And our city manager, of course, leads the charge and is always there for all of us. So I'm good to move forward with these 3 recommendations.
Thank you. Councilmember Sylvester.
I second what my fellow council members have said. I think we have a wonderful staff. They always respond when we have outrageous demands with a smile. So thank you for that. And I just have to say I really enjoy working with this team, and I hope you will be here for a long time. So I, too, can move forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Wolf.
Echoing what my fellow council member said, I feel comfortable moving forward with these 3 items. Not only do I think that it's important, but it's important for the city because we want to be competitive, and we want to keep and retain the high-quality staff. And with high cost of living and inflation, I think this is a really important thing to do, so I will be able to make all the findings. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Wolf. And my comments pretty much mirror my fellow council members' comments. I think the staff has done a great job. I really appreciate all their hard work this year and also next year. I know we have a lot of things on the agenda to be complete on our what our to-do list going forward, and look forward to working with everyone to complete those going forward. But again, I think it's a very fair raise that we've implemented this year for the city staff and the city manager for all his hard work. So thank you again for great work. So I'm ready to move forward with the resolution as well. Does anybody have any further comments before we move forward? Nope. Okay. So therefore, I will now call for a motion and a second to adopt resolution number 23-2037 and resolution number 23-2038 and approve the third amendment to the city manager's employment agreement and performance bonus. Will the maker of the motion and the second please state your names? Do I have them?
Mayor Pro Tem Buckley Weber moves to approve the staff recommendation.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
Councilmember Sylvester seconds.
Thank you very much. I'll now defer to the city clerk for a roll call vote.
Councilmember Lopez?
Aye.
Councilmember Sylvester?
Aye.
Councilmember Wolf?
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Buckley Weber?
Aye.
Mayor Anstead?
Aye.
Mayor Anstead, you have approval, 5-0.
Thank you very much. We'll now move to the next item, which is the budget, public hearing on the budget. Our next item is a public hearing to consider adoption of resolution number 23-2039, establishing fiscal year 2023-24 appropriations limitations, and resolution number 2040, adopting the annual budget and appropriations for fiscal year 2023-24, approving the annual budget for fiscal year 24-25, authorizing amendments to the fiscal year 2022-23 annual budget, and adopting citywide goals for fiscal years 2023 through 24 and 24 through 25. I will now open the public hearing and defer to the Director of Finance, Christy Trulson, for the staff presentation.
Honorable Mayor, members of the council, staff is pleased to present the city's two-year budget plan covering the fiscal years 2023-24 and 2024-25. Staff is recommending that the City Council adopt and appropriate the fiscal year 2023-24 budget, approve the fiscal year 2024-25 budget, and approve amendments to the 2022-23 budget. The 2023-24 revenues in the general fund are projected to be $18.7 million. The city has been preparing this budget since January. Beginning in March, the City Council held 2 goal-setting workshops and a detailed budget workshop, reviewing the details of the budget, establishing goals, and the allocation of funding for the city's infrastructure improvements. The City Council, various committees, and staff worked hard to present a balanced budget for 2023-24. There are special funds which will be utilized for specific projects over the next year. And for the general public, these funds are comprised of one-time grant funds or funds that are earmarked or limited to special uses, such as transportation capital projects. The fiscal year 2023-24 capital improvement projects plan includes $877,000 in special funds for the construction of new restrooms at Chumash Park and $2.6 million for storm drain diversion projects. Additionally, $11 million is budgeted for a linear park project. The Finance Committee, City Council, and staff have spent a significant amount of time looking at the needs of the community, establishing measurable goals, and creating a budget that is aimed to accomplish those goals. Staff respectfully recommends the City Council conduct a public hearing to consider the adoption of resolution number 23-2039, establishing fiscal year 2023-24 appropriations limit, and resolution 23-2040, adopting the annual budget for fiscal year 2023-24 including fiscal year 2023-24 appropriations, approving the annual budget for fiscal year 2024-25, and authorizing amendments to the fiscal year 2022-23 annual budget, and adopting citywide goals for fiscal years 2023-24 and 2024-25. That concludes my report.
Thank you for that great presentation. Before we move on to public comment, does any council member have questions of staff? No questions? All right. Written public comments were requested to be emailed in advance of tonight's meeting. If you wish to speak, please click the raised hand button on the Zoom toolbar now. Public testimony is limited to 3 minutes per speaker, and the speaker's time may not be transferred to another speaker. We respectfully request that if you have something to distribute to the council, you hand it to our city clerk and do not approach the dais. The public hearing is open, and I will defer to the city clerk for public comments.
Thank you, Mayor Anstead. No written public comments have been received and no speaker cards have been submitted. I'll now defer to staff for any remote participants.
Thank you, Mayor Anstead. No hands are raised to speak on this item.
Thank you. Before closing the public hearing, do any council members have any further questions of staff? All right. That being no further questions, I will now close the public hearing. Before we move on to deliberations, does any council member have any further comments? Before we move on? Okay. We'll now move into deliberations. I will start with Councilmember Lopez.
Thank you. Kind of like our last item, this is not something that has come before us just a few minutes ago. We've been working on this for a very, very long time, especially as part of the Finance Committee. We've been seeing this for quite a few months, and I'm always so impressed at how our Finance Director can work with all of our senior staff to fit in, as Councilmember Sylvester said, sometimes the very demanding goals of 5 different council members. And I like to say that a budget is a moral document, and so if you go through it, you'll see that we care very much about public safety, we care very much about our parks, environmental sustainability, going forward to bike lanes, you know, it's all in there. So with great appreciation and gratitude, I am good to proceed with these 2 years of budget. Thank you.
Thank you. Now I'll call on Mayor Pro Tem Buckley Weber for comment.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Ditto to what Councilmember Lopez said. It is important that the residents know that we've been working on this since January. And so although we're just sitting up here with no questions, we've asked thousands of questions in the last 6 months. And I just want to say congratulations to our staff. We have a balanced budget again, and it's something that we feel strongly about. And thank you for all the hard work.
Council members.
I agree with what my fellow council members have said, and this was my first time going through the budget, and I was extremely impressed by how thoughtfully you laid everything out and made it very clear where the money was going and where the income was coming from. So I do appreciate that, and I'm ready to move forward. Thank you.
Excellent. Councilmember Wolf.
So like Council Member Sylvester, this was my first budget process going through, and sitting on the Finance Committee with Council Member Klein Lopez. We've been working on this for many months, so I appreciate the staff's time. And this budget really encompasses the financial roadmap that's going to guide us in the coming year. And as Council Member Klein Lopez says, it's more than just numbers. It represents the investment in the future of Agoura Hills. I'm really proud of this. It's a testament to our shared values. I appreciate the work that went into this and look forward to supporting it. Thank you.
You got it. Thank you for your comments. And my comments on this item are, I think it's been fantastic that we've been able to keep a balanced budget, at the same time kind of prioritize a lot of the things that the council feels is important. I think one of the things that we've tried to, I think, place as the #1 priority has been public safety, and we're spending our money kind of on those items that show that we're prioritizing public safety in this city. And so I think that's great. We're working closely also with Captain C2 and a lot of initiatives as well. And also we're improving the city at the same time with some of these capital projects, like the new restroom facilities in our major parks. So I think it's a great thing that we're kind of being able to balance a lot of different priorities and still kind of keep the public safety as our number one priority. So as the budget reads, I'm ready to move forward as well. So I will now call for a motion and a second to approve and adopt resolution number 23-2039 and resolution number 23-2040. Do I have a motion and a second?
So moved. This is Deborah Klein Lopez.
Great, thank you. Do I have a second?
Councilmember Wolf, I'll second.
Thank you very much. I'll now defer to the city clerk for a roll call vote.
Councilmember Lopez?
Aye.
Councilmember Sylvester?
Aye.
Councilmember Wolf?
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Buckley Weber?
Aye.
Mayor Anstead?
Aye.
Mayor Anstead, you have approval, 5-0.
Thank you very much. Our next item is a public hearing to consider ordinance number 23-471 to amend the Agoura Hills Municipal Code to establish a ministerial permit process for qualifying single-family residences, duplexes, and urban lot splits, and establish objective zoning, design, and subdivision standards consistent with state law enacted by SB 9. I will now open the public hearing and defer to Community Development Director Denise Thomas for the staff presentation.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, Mayor, City Council. My name's Denise Thomas, and I'm the Community Development Director here in the City of Agoura Hills. We are bringing forward an item that would provide you with some information about Senate Bill 9, and we are making recommendations so that we can incorporate the state law provisions into our code, and to ask you for objective standards that will allow us to ensure that the developments that we see fit into the community character of the City of Agoura Hills. With that, I will defer to Robbie Nesevic, our senior planner, who's the project manager for this item. Thank you.
Thank you, Denise. So if we could go to the next slide and get started with the agenda. So I'm going to start off by explaining the legislative background of the bill, followed by its applicability within the city. Then we will discuss what SB 9 actually does and how the draft ordinance intends to implement objective standards while meeting state law requirements and preserving the city's aesthetic character. Lastly, we will present some potential development examples before going over staff's recommendation. Next slide, please. In 2019, the state passed the Housing Crisis Act, or HCA, which declared a statewide housing emergency. The HCA lists housing supply as a primary cause of the housing crisis and also identifies the severe impacts the crisis continues to have on the state. As a result, the goal of the HCA was and is to suspend restrictions on new housing and to expedite the permitting of housing across the state. Following the passing of the HCA, numerous state housing laws have been approved to further these goals. Next slide, please. This brings us to SB 9, which was approved in 2021 and went into effect on January 1st, 2022. The bill aims to increase density in single-family residential zones by removing local discretion for housing projects which contain up to 2 dwelling units. Housing projects submitted under SB 9 will also be subject to the streamlining requirements outlined in the HCA. I also think it is important to emphasize right off the bat that Senate Bill 9 is already in effect, and we are already required to process applications in accordance with the bill. What the proposed ordinance does is establish objective standards that the city can implement and enforce, providing guardrails for development and ensuring that new housing meets community expectations in terms of architectural quality and community character. Next slide, please. Adopting an SB 9 ordinance is also listed as a high priority action item in Appendix B of our housing element to help affirmatively further fair housing. All housing elements due on or after January 1st, 2021 are required to contain an assessment of fair housing consistent with the core elements of the analysis required by the federal Affirmatively Furthering Fair Housing Final Rule of July 16, 2015. Under state law, affirmatively furthering fair housing means taking meaningful actions in addition to combating discrimination that overcome patterns of segregation and foster inclusive communities free from barriers that restrict access to opportunity based on projected characteristics. By allowing for lot splits and duplexes under the parameters of SB 9 and the proposed ordinance, it is the goal of the housing element to provide more affordable housing options throughout the high resource areas of the city. Next slide, please. Eligibility for properties will be determined on an individual basis. However, the map on the screen should give you an idea of which areas of the city will be subject to SB 9, with yellow highlighted parcels likely being subject to the bill. To be eligible for SB 9, a property must be zoned primarily for single-family housing. Within the city, the three applicable zoning designations are RS, which is the residential single-family district, RL, which is the residential low-density district, and RV, which is the residential very low-density district. The project may not demolish affordable housing or more than 25% of the existing exterior structural walls of a building if there is an existing tenant. Also, the property must not be located within the following areas: a historic district or property, wetlands, a hazardous waste site, a FEMA flood zone unless a letter of map revision is prepared, lands identified for conservation in an adopted natural community conservation plan, habitat for protected species as defined by the government code, and lands under conservation easement. Next slide, please. You may have noticed that the list of areas I just gave you did not include the very high fire hazard severity zone. Government Code Section 65913.4, as referenced by SB 9, does not allow the city to deny projects based on the fact that they are in the very high fire hazard severity zone, because the city has adopted fire hazard mitigation measures that are applicable to all developments in the city. Next slide, please. There are two parts of SB 9 we are going to talk about today. Section 1 requires that any housing development containing up to 2 units within a single-family zone be considered ministerially without discretionary review or hearing, and sets the parameters for what a local agency can impose on development. The bill states that the local agency shall not impose objective zoning standards, objective subdivision standards, and objective design standards that would have the effect of physically precluding the construction of up to 2 units, or that would physically preclude either of the 2 units from being at least 800 square feet in floor area. Next slide, please. The bill also states that units shall be rented for longer than 30 days, and it does not allow local agencies to deny a project because it proposes connected structures. It prohibits rear and side setbacks of more than 4 feet for new structures and eliminates setback requirements for existing structures. Each unit will be required to provide 1 parking space unless the property is within a half mile of a high-quality transit corridor or within a block of a car share vehicle, in which case we would not be able to require any on-site parking spaces. Furthermore, when reviewing a project application, a local agency may only use objective standards when determining whether to approve the project. We'll touch on this in more depth later in the presentation. Next slide, please. The second section of SB 9 requires the ministerial approval of a parcel map subdividing 1 parcel into 2 separate parcels. Each resulting lot shall be no smaller than 40% of the original parcel area, and neither lot can be smaller than 1,200 square feet. A parcel is ineligible if it was established through a prior urban lot split, meaning that a parcel cannot be split multiple times. Additionally, the owner or any person acting in concert with the owner cannot split 2 adjacent lots. This would help prevent one person from buying adjacent properties and splitting them both. Next slide, please. Section 2 also prohibits local agencies from requiring off-site improvements or dedications of rights-of-way as a condition of approving a parcel map for an urban lot split. However, the bill does allow a local agency to require easements for the provision of public services and facilities, and may require that a parcel have access to, provide access to, or adjoin the public right-of-way. Next slide, please. Furthermore, this section prohibits local agencies from requiring the correction of non-conforming zoning conditions as a condition of issuance of a parcel map. And when a parcel is developed using an urban lot split, each parcel will be limited to residential use, and the owner must sign an affidavit stating that they intend to occupy one of the housing units for at least 3 years. Lastly, in the case of an urban lot split, only 2 units may be allowed per lot, inclusive of ADUs and junior ADUs. Next slide, please. To demonstrate the number of allowable units more clearly, I included a little infographic. So the first row is what was allowed prior to the adoption of SB 9 last year. So previously you were able to have 1 single family home plus an accessory dwelling unit and a junior accessory dwelling unit. What Senate Bill 9 does is it allows you to have 2 primary dwelling units plus an accessory dwelling unit and a junior accessory dwelling unit. Or in the case of an urban lot split, on on the row on the bottom, you can split your lot and then have 2 units of any kind on each lot. Next slide, please. One of the more significant aspects of SB 9 is that it streamlines the permitting process. When a development application for a new single-family house has been submitted in the past, it is subject to a site plan review and usually gets submitted to the architectural review panel for review and comment. During the first 30-day period and during the architectural review process, HOAs are given the opportunity to comment on the project. These projects have also been subject to the California Environmental Quality Act, although for the most part, single-family projects are exempt, and a notice of exemption is required to be filed with the county clerk. Following the architectural review panel's review, all comments and recommendations have been forwarded to the Planning Commission to inform their decisions. Under SB 9, we are required to approve new housing developments ministerially and without a public hearing. Since the projects are ministerial, they are not considered a project under CEQA, meaning that no environmental document or public noticing is required. Additionally, since SB 9 only allows the city to apply objective standards, HOA comments and recommendations cannot be taken into consideration when determining whether to approve a project. While we believe the draft ordinance will ensure the retention of community character to the extent possible, we have reached out to our HOAs recommending that they review the draft ordinance and provide feedback on our objective standards. Next slide, please. That leads us into the topic of objective standards. Both sections 1 and 2 of SB 9 allow the city to impose objective standards within the confines of the bill. However, it is the position of the California Department of Housing and Community Development, also known as HCD, that local agencies are required to take other state laws into consideration, such as the Housing Crisis Act and Housing Element Law, as described in HCD's Letter of Technical Assistance to Temple City, which is attached to the staff report as Exhibit E. The biggest hoop to jump through when drafting the objective standards for the SB 9 ordinance is the fact that the Housing Crisis Act prohibits local agencies from reducing the intensity of land use anywhere housing is an allowable use without concurrently increasing intensity of use elsewhere. The HCA defines the reduction of land use intensity as any act which would individually or cumulatively reduce a site's residential development capacity, including reductions in height, density, floor area ratio, new or increased open space or lot size requirements, new or increased setback requirements, minimum frontage requirements, maximum lot coverage limitations, or anything that would lessen the intensity of housing. Next slide, please. The difficulty of complying with the Housing Crisis Act and SB 9 as it relates to Agoura Hills is that our current zoning ordinance contains mostly guidelines for single-family projects in order to promote design flexibility as opposed to objective standards. To avoid conflict with the Housing Crisis Act and HCD, existing objective standards were used where possible, and existing guidelines were modified to be objective without reducing land use intensity. Additionally, new design standards were imposed to ensure neighborhood compatibility and architectural quality while still allowing flexibility in design. Next slide, please. The first standards we're going to talk about are the new landscape standards. Staff took our current landscape guidelines and created new objective standards to meet the intent of our guidelines. The new standards require all front yard areas visible from the adjacent right-of-way to be landscaped, and all landscaping shall be at least 50% native species, and no invasive species or palm trees may be used. New landscape areas shall use at least 5 different shrubs and ground covers to provide foliage, texture, and color. Artificial turf is discouraged to reduce the urban heat island effect, fire danger, and environmental impacts, including waste materials and microplastic pollution. Staff considered an artificial turf ban. However, state law does not allow local agencies to ban artificial turf on residential property, so the goal is to inform the public about the negative impacts of artificial turf in an attempt to persuade property owners to avoid using it. Next slide, please. The ordinance uses the city's current oak tree standards to put limits on the removal of oak trees, and only the standards that are specific towards new single-family development have been retained. Not more than 10% of the total canopy or root structure of all oak trees on a property shall be removed, and 4 oak trees shall be provided as mitigation if the project encroaches greater than 20% into the root zone or canopy zone of an oak tree. Additionally, an oak tree may only be removed or altered if the existence of the oak tree prevents the property from achieving the permitted density, or if the cost of an alternative would be prohibitive. In other words, a project would have to be redesigned to avoid existing oak trees unless it would render the development of the lot impossible or infeasible. In those instances where oak trees have to be removed, a 4-to-1 mitigation would be required on the site. Next slide, please. The city's current guidelines do not allow outdoor lighting to illuminate neighboring properties. The proposed SB9 ordinance makes the current language objective by requiring all lighting to be shielded and downward facing. Next slide, please. The proposed hillside standards mirror our affordable housing overlay standards, except they have been modified for single-family development and attempt to capture the intent of our hillside ordinance while making the standards objective. On a hillside lot, no development shall be allowed on slopes greater than 35%, and those areas shall be excluded from the average slope calculation. In working with applicants for affordable housing projects, this standard has been problematic in a few instances where the front of the property has a steep slope, making access to the lot impossible without waivers. For this reason, an exemption was added for required access roads. Structures must also be located 20 feet from the top of a slope greater than 10%, and stilt and cantilevered structures are prohibited in the very high fire hazard severity zone. Next slide, please. I also want to note that there is an existing standard in the hillside ordinance which limits the height of structures to 15 feet above the elevation of the property line with the highest elevation. On a convexly shaped lot, this standard has made some properties undevelopable without a variance. For example, the picture on the screen represents a house located on a convex lot. If the house was limited to being only 15 feet higher than the rear property line, more than half of the lot would be undevelopable, and it would represent a scenario where certain property owners would be unequally impacted. For this reason, the 15-foot height limit remains, but an exemption was added for convex lots. In this scenario, the structure would still be required to be set back 20 feet from the top of the slope. Next slide, please. For the Old Agoura overlay, the existing design guidelines were modified to be objective where possible. The maximum floor area limitations were modified to always allow at least 1,600 square feet of floor area in compliance with SB9. There is also currently an exemption to floor area ratio calculations in Old Agoura to accommodate a 3-car garage up to 690 square feet. Since we are not allowed to require more than 1 parking space per unit for SB9 developments, staff is proposing a floor area exemption for 2 2-car garages for a total of 920 square feet in the case of an application for 2 primary dwelling units. The purpose is to incentivize off-street parking spaces since most of the roads in Old Agoura are privately owned and maintained. In Old Agoura, concrete shall be stained, stamped, or exposed aggregate, and chip seal shall be used in place of asphalt. If fencing is used in front yard areas, equestrian-style fencing is encouraged but not required. Next slide, please. In the equestrian overlay, there is a provision which requires property owners to dedicate at least 1,500 square feet of lot area to horsekeeping purposes. While all property owners may not keep horses, that 1,500 square foot area may not be developed with structures that have permanent foundations. The overlay gives the Planning Commission the authority to waive this requirement on lots smaller than 10,890 square feet, and since the Planning Commission will not have the ability to make a determination on SB9 projects, an exemption was added for lots smaller than 10,890 square feet. Next slide, please. Certain parcels may be reduced to under 10,890 square feet in the case of an urban lot split. In total, there are 489 parcels in the equestrian overlay district. Of those parcels, approximately 33% have the potential to undergo an urban lot split where both of the resulting parcels would not be required to maintain a 1,500 square foot horsekeeping area. These parcels are shown in purple on the screen. And if you could move it to the next slide, I zoomed in a little bit. Approximately 81 parcels could undergo a lot split where only one of the resulting parcels would not be required to maintain the horsekeeping area. This results in about a third of the properties in the equestrian overlay having the potential to waive the 1,500 square foot equestrian requirement in the case of an urban lot split. This being said, it is important to note that even when a 1,500 square foot area is required on larger lots, it is always optional to actually accommodate horses because we don't have the ability to compel property owners to maintain horses. So while we would not be imposing a 1,500 square foot minimum horsekeeping area on lots under 10,890 square feet, Property owners would still have the option to maintain horses on their property if they wanted to, just like any other property in the equestrian overlay. Next slide, please. That brings us to the new design standards, which are inspired by our affordable housing overlay requirements and the city's architectural design guidelines, except that the standards were modified to be specific to single-family housing developments. The city's current guidelines place importance upon creative design, neighborhood compatibility, and harmony with natural landforms and native vegetation. The proposed objective design standards aim to accomplish that by allowing flexibility in design while also maintaining a high degree of architectural quality and limiting building colors to those that complement the natural environment. Using the book titled A Field Guide to American Houses by Virginia Savage McAllister, project plans must identify an architectural style and be consistent with at least 5 of the features on the screen, with roof type and characteristic pitch being a required feature. Allowing an applicant to choose the architectural style they want while also requiring a minimum number of architectural features will help to ensure architectural quality while allowing creativity in design. Next slide, please. Weather protection is required at residential unit entries using treatments such as overhangs, awnings, porch roofs, trellises, or canopies. This will also help to provide a sense of depth and will help to break up building facades. Earth tone colors must be used, and fluorescent or neon colors, as well as vinyl siding, mirrored gloss tiles, and T111 plywood is prohibited. Next slide, please. To eliminate large unbroken 2-story facades along the public right-of-way, homes proposing a second story and facing the right-of-way shall provide second-story offsets, and massing shall be reduced by using 2 approaches of the applicant's choice. Some options are having a varying roof line, incorporating dormers to break up large roof expanses, having recessed or protruding windows, incorporating changes into color or texture, or creating depth with varying setbacks in the facade using porches, balconies, or recessed entryways. Next slide, please. For residences with second stories, we also added 2 privacy standards. The first does not allow a balcony to be built with direct views into existing adjacent residential side or rear yards unless landscaping is provided for screening. This standard does not apply if the balcony is at least 40 feet from the property line. Additionally, second-story windows within 40 feet of an existing home must stagger the windows to avoid direct lines of sight, as depicted on the screen. Next slide, please. In the case of an urban lot split, flag lots are prohibited in the RS zoning district, and lot lines shall be straight lines unless there is a conflict with existing improvements or the natural environment. Urban lot splits will be processed in the same manner as a parcel map, except it shall be reviewed and approved by the Community Development Department. Next slide, please. And lastly, pursuant to SB 9, an exception was added which states that all objective standards shall be met unless the standard would have the effect of physically precluding the construction of up to 2 units or would physically preclude either of the 2 units from being at least 800 square feet of floor area. Any standard shall only be waived or reduced to the extent necessary to allow construction of the affected unit to a size no greater than 800 square feet. A good example of this would be a required setback. Usually in the RS zoning district, there is a minimum front setback of 25 feet. However, if the front setback somehow precluded the development of 2 800 square foot houses, they would be able to reduce the requirement to whatever is needed to accommodate the 2 houses, but no further. Additionally, the applicant could not propose a new 2,000 square foot house and request an exemption from front setback standards, because in that scenario, the setback provision would not be limiting the development of at least an 800 square foot unit. Next slide, please. So now that we are done going over the objective standards, we wanted to allow you to visualize what an urban lot split would actually look like in Old Agoura if both lots were developed to their maximum potential. For the first example, the pink equestrian lot on the screen is an actual lot in Old Agoura that has a lot size of 21,780 square feet and an existing 1,840 square foot house. If the owner wanted to upgrade their house without SB 9 under a discretionary review process, we would allow a 4,107 square foot house to be constructed under the current Old Agoura design guidelines. In this SB 9 development scenario, we split the lot using a 60-40 split, making the larger parcel 13,068 square feet and the smaller parcel 8,712 square feet. As you can see, the larger lot is still big enough to require the 1,500 square foot equestrian area, and the maximum amount of floor area for the new Lot 1 would be 2,613 square feet. Since their current house is only about 1,800 square feet, they would be able to do an addition and add a 773 square foot attached house. On the smaller lot, the maximum floor area allowed would be 1,742 square feet, and an equestrian area would not be required. We currently show a proposed duplex with one house being 1,005 square feet and the other being 736 square feet. Both newly created lots would have an allowable impermeable surface coverage of 35%, incentivizing the driveway to be made with impermeable surface materials such as gravel or pavers to meet this requirement. I also want to note that this image conveys the absolute maximum residential building capacity allowed on this lot under SB 9, assuming that the houses are all one story. If an owner wanted to have more space on their lot, they could propose two-story houses, which would shrink the allowable residential building pad considerably. Next slide, please. In the next example, we have a blue lot from the equestrian overlay, which is 24,664 square feet and has an existing 2,246 square foot structure. After a 60-40 lot split, the larger lot would be 14,798 square feet and would allow 2,959 square feet of floor area, allowing a 713 square foot dwelling to be added to the existing unit. The lot would also be required to have the 1,500 square foot equestrian area. The smaller lot would be 9,865 square feet and would have an allowable floor area of 1,937 square feet. The lot coverage of the existing and proposed lots would all be 25%. Next slide, please. For the last example, we have an existing 2-acre lot with an existing 3,688 square foot house. If the lot was split into two 1-acre lots, each lot would be able to contain a house with a maximum floor area of 5,830 square feet, and each lot would need to provide a 1,500 square foot equestrian area. The rear lot also shows a 35% slope area, which is not able to accommodate development. I will reiterate that all of these design examples depict the absolute maximum residential building area if the structures are one story. Realistically, particularly in this last example with two 5,000 square foot houses, the units would be 2 stories and the actual footprint of the structures would be much smaller. In conclusion, I really want to nail down the point that Senate Bill 9 is already in effect and city staff is already required to process applications in accordance with the bill. The purpose of the proposed ordinance is to establish standards to ensure the development of single-family lots is compatible with existing community character and to protect orderly planning and aesthetics related to such development by creating objective standards the city can implement and enforce. Next slide, please. With that, staff respectfully recommends the City Council adopt ordinance number 23-471, amending Article 9 zoning and Article 10 subdivisions of the Agoura Hills Municipal Code to establish a ministerial permit process for qualifying single-family residences, duplexes, and urban lot splits, and to establish objective zoning, design, and subdivision standards consistent with state law enacted by Senate Bill 9. Next slide, please. And that concludes my presentation, and we will now open the floor to the City Council.
Thank you very much for that great presentation. Before we move on to public comment, does any council member have questions on the staff presentation? Councilmember Lopez.
I have a couple of questions. Even though, once again, I serve on the Land Use Economic Development Committee, it's a lot to absorb, so I just also want to confirm some of these things because I know our residents are listening to you. So the first question is, how many lots, how many applications have we received under SB 9?
0.
0 so far. Okay, and for the old Agoura area, the way I read your map is, which by the way, the maps are fantastic, so thank you for the graphics. 81 lots, which is 17% of our inventory, would not have to set aside room for the equestrian area because of their lot size if they did a lot split. Is that the right understanding of it?
So one of the two split lots would have to have the equestrian and the other one would not. So then the net would be no net change because originally the original parcel would have required one 1,500 square foot equestrian area. So when you split it, the net is still one 1,500 square foot equestrian area, if that makes sense.
So do we have any lots where it would split into two with 0 equestrian?
Yes, that's 33%. So those are the purple parcels that were
Those
on
were
the
the purple.
that were on the map, and also a lot of them are kind of close to that 20,000 square foot mark because that's the minimum allowable lot size for the RL zoning district. So you would have to split your lot exactly 50-50 in order to get out of the equestrian mandate for the 1,500 square feet. If you did a 60-40 lot split on a lot of those purple parcels, then you would still have to have the equestrian on one of them.
Okay. And 33% is of our total inventory?
That's correct.
Okay. And then, excuse me, I think, so we got a few letters from the members of the public, so I just want to clarify, SB 9 is already in place, and what happens if we do not approve everything we've just talked about tonight? It's still in place, we have less control, is that right?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, so, and my last question is, in one of the graphics, I did see a flag lot. We talked about this in our meeting, but can you just quickly go over the discussion that the Planning Commission had about flag lots? It sounds like they're prohibited unless it once again interferes with the ability to provide the housing under SB 9.
That's correct. So if you look at our RL zoning district, it's a minimum lot size of 20,000 square feet. However, the minimum lot proportions are 200 feet by about 70 feet. So if there's an existing house on there and they aren't able to split it horizontally, they could potentially say that the urban lot split was physically precluding them being able to split the lot and put 2 units on one of those lots.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Buckley Weber. I'm just to you.
Thank you, and thank you for the presentation. So, and I know you've answered a lot of my questions already, but I'm going to go over a couple. In the case with the septic system, a study needs to be done, and if it comes back, who pays for that study? Is that the city or is that the developer?
That's the applicant.
The applicant. And so if it comes back and it says that the septic system would not be able to handle 4 homes on the lot, that would be grounds for us to not allow a lot split or the development of the housing.
Right, that would be an objective health and safety standard, so we would be able to deny the project.
Okay. Do you know, I know throughout it talks about short-term rentals are prohibited. Under Senate Bill 9, can we have the rental be more than 30 days? I know that's the minimum, but can we have more?
Yes, yes. I'll let Candace answer that.
So if you look at the statute of SB 9, and I have it here so I can read it, it expressly says that the city we shall require that a rental of any unit created pursuant to this section, SB 9, be for a term longer than 30 days. It does not say that it could be longer than 60 days or 90 days. So the further you move away from that 30-day mark, I think there's an argument that it's not consistent with SB 9. So I think the safest route is to just stick with the 30 days.
But that can be a short-term rental then, a 30-day rental. That's short-term.
Well, I guess it depends on how you define short-term.
Well, that's how
if
this
it's
would
30
be
days or
defined.
longer, then usually that's not considered a short-term rental.
But we do know that that could happen, right? So these could all become rentals. They would just be rentals for 30 days, and people perhaps work something out with the landlord saying words to the effect of, I really only need it for 3 weeks. And the landlord could say, well, I'll give you a refund. Is that right? I mean, that's a way to get around it if we stick with 30 days.
Well, it's technically would be 31 days or more, right? But
Right.
I guess conceivably, but technically they're supposed to rent it for more, it can't be rented less than 30 days.
Right. I just don't see 30 days. In today's world, I don't see 30 days as meaning that we're going to increase housing in Agoura Hills because, 30 days, I mean, people are doing that all the time now, so I just don't see that. So that was just a question I had about that. Moving on. Now, I know that there's a restricted use actually, I think it says that the city must restrict the newly created parcels under the lot split to residential uses, but then if one of the units is an office, that's not a residential use, so how do we enforce that? What do we do about that?
They would be required to have a home occupation permit, so they would have to essentially say that whatever use of the property is accessory to the residential use. So we wouldn't issue a we wouldn't issue a business license to somebody who is running an office out of their home unless they were using it for residential primarily, and then having just a home office as an accessory use.
And so residential is primary. Look, we're seeing people get around all this stuff all throughout the state. So could I just throw a fold-out couch into my ADU and conduct business out of it?
Without a search warrant, we wouldn't know that you just threw a sofa out. However, we have home occupation businesses existing today all over the city. Some of them comply with the standards of our home occupation, but our home occupation ordinance, we receive complaints daily about people who believe that home occupations are being used not for home occupations. So realistically, it's treating those homes the same as we treat the homes that currently exist in the city. I don't believe there's any kind of regulation you could impose short of us going into people's homes on a regular basis to determine where they're living and how they're living. What we can do is make sure that at the time that they receive their permit to go into the house, that they're functioning within the code. And if we have complaints, then we will investigate those complaints and we'll address the situations.
Okay, so we can't really enforce it, but we're not enforcing it now, so we can't enforce it on these new units.
We are enforcing it. It's just that if you decide that you want to run a winery from your home in Old Agoura, what we can do is find out you're running a winery from your home, and then we begin the exercise of code enforcement. It's not unique to SB 9 properties. It's prevalent everywhere. So we have to just deal with it on a holistic level everywhere.
Okay. And if we were to have, no, that's, now, I know some of our neighboring cities are putting in a maximum unit size. So we're not prohibited from doing that. That's not staff's recommendation, but we're not prohibited as a council from doing that.
Candace, did you want to answer that?
So if you read the text of SB 9 itself, it says that the city is able to impose objective criteria so long as it doesn't preclude the building of 2 800 square foot units. There may be varying interpretations throughout the state regarding the intersection of that and other state laws, but if you look at just this text of SB 9, it says as long as you're not precluding a unit of 800 square feet.
Okay, thank you. And then the last question I just want to clarify to make sure that I'm clear on it, because it's been a while since the housing element, but there's the objective standards, which are like setbacks and I would call them construction-based or zoning-based, and then there's the design standards. Applicants can get waivers from the construction standards if by imposing those standards, they could not build units of 800 square feet, they can get waivers. But on the design standards, since those would not affect the size of the structure, they can't get waivers from that. Is that right?
Correct. However, I do want to note, I wouldn't think of it as a waiver because that's a specific term used by the State Density Bonus Act. This is different than that. SB 9 just says that we as a city cannot impose any objective standard which would physically preclude the development of at least an 800 square foot unit. So they would essentially say this particular standard is not allowing us to construct an 800 square foot unit, and we would have to make a determination on whether or not that's true and accurate.
Okay, and so just so I'm clear, if there's a heritage oak on a lot, we can't stop them from removing the heritage oak if that's the only place that they could put an 800 square foot structure.
Hypothetically, yes. They would have to look everywhere else to put that structure. So I would say that would be a very rare circumstance.
Okay, and then if they couldn't do the 4-to-1 mitigation, they would just pay the in lieu fee.
Whatever is applicable for our ordinance, yes.
Thank you. That's all the questions I have.
Okay. Any other council members have questions?
No questions at this time. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Wolf.
Yeah, thank you. So just to be clear, currently SB 9 is in law, but we don't have some of the standards that we're hoping for. So the equestrian overlay, that is not in effect right now. So is that correct?
That's correct. We would only be able to enforce a handful of our current standards that are within our municipal code currently.
Okay, thank you. My next question is regarding a sewer connection. If they're not able to, actually my first one was in the Indian Hills Overlay District, and this is on page 10. I'm a little confused about what it's talking about with water and sewer there is the Indian Hills Overlay District not included? And does it need to be connected to sewer, and that can't be on septic?
So we do have an objective standard that requires Indian Hills to connect to the sewer. However, if they could potentially argue that SB 9 doesn't allow offsite improvements, then we would essentially allow them to see if they could get an on-site septic, which conforms to the LA County Health Department. My understanding is that Indian Hills, the type of soil would be very difficult to have a septic system, so we don't anticipate that happening.
And not being able to connect to a sewer line, that's not grounds for, in what world would not being able to connect to a sewer prohibit SB 9 implementation?
We would be able to deny the project if they couldn't connect to the sewer and they couldn't have the septic, because that's objective health and safety.
Okay, thank you. Those are all my questions. I appreciate it.
Thank you. I've got actually a couple questions, but it all centers around the parking space, the one parking space that we can mandate if it's not within a certain distance. Can you go back over that again? And can you also, I don't know if you have it specific to Old Agoura, on whether all the streets in Old Agoura meet that requirement that they won't have to have a parking space if they were to split the lot. So I'm just trying to understand how much of our city is affected by that.
Right now, 0. We don't have a major transit stop within the city, so every residential lot would have to have one parking space. That may change in sometime in the future. We're just not sure of that. So the reason why we made that particular provision specific to Old Agoura is that most of the roads are private and aren't maintained the same as the city-owned roads. So we wanted to incentivize off-street parking with the floor area for the parking structures.
So they would not or would have to have the parking space?
They would have to have at least one parking space.
Right. And the transit, I didn't know if it was a transit stop or I thought maybe like a bus stop was the same. That's not the same thing as a transit stop.
It's defined in the government code, so it has to stop a certain number of times per hour, and we don't have that, we don't meet that criteria within the city currently.
So just to make sure I'm clarifying this, every lot split in Agoura under SB 9 would have to have a parking space for each home that was, if they split it into two homes, each one of them has to have a parking space on that property, on that area.
As of right now, yes.
Thank you for clarifying that. That's good. I wanted to make sure I understood that fully. That's my only question. I think anybody else have any questions before we move forward? Okay.
Can I just ask one more clarifying question? So the lot's split and there's a primary residence and then an ADU on each one. So would that be 4 parking spaces required? So every dwelling unit requires a parking space?
That's correct.
Thank you. I just want to be clear.
Actually, I got to make sure I follow up on that. That's only under this SB 9, though. If they were to do the ADU, just a regular ADU, they're not required to have the parking space.
ADUs are different.
Yeah, okay. Got it. Thank you. All right, so we're going to move to written public comments. Written public comments were requested to be emailed in advance of tonight's meeting. If you wish to speak, please click the raised hand button on the Zoom toolbar now. Public testimony is limited to 3 minutes per speaker, and a speaker's time may not be transferred to another speaker. We respectfully request that if you have something to distribute to the council, you hand it to our city clerk and do not approach the dais. The public hearing is open, and I will now defer to the city clerk for public comments.
Thank you, Mayor Anstead. Written public comments were received by email on or before the 4 p.m. deadline today and forwarded to the City Council prior to the meeting, and they will be part of the permanent record. Public comments were received from George Coleman, Old Agoura, and Courtney Welch, Oakland, representing the California Housing Defense Fund. In addition, we have 2 speakers in the chamber. The first is Tara Farkash, followed by Danny Farkash.
Welcome. Thank you.
Hello. Am I on? Am I on now? There I am. Okay. Hi, my name is Tara Farkash. I live in Old Agoura, and I have some questions. While I appreciate all of the work that's been done on this, a lot was presented, and a lot of it was like over my head. So I appreciate that, but I have some questions. One of them is, while I know that this is in effect at this time, but I don't know how far it has been adopted or because I don't know if the consideration was out there for the safety. We all know the fiasco that went on with the Woolsey fire and evacuations, and now you're going to have even more evacuations and more people trying to get out and more horse trailers trying to get out. And while the net amount of horse keeping areas won't be any changed, there will be a lot more people. And they may have animals as well, maybe not horses, but they may have other animals. I'm also wondering about the fact that now in Old Agoura, it is very hard to get fire insurance. Several insurance companies has pulled out. Is this going to affect SB 9? Is going to affect the matter of high density now? We're not in single family homes. We are now going into high density, in my opinion. Also, we have the state dictating to us when we should wear a mask, when we should shut down businesses, who is an essential worker. And now they're going into telling us how we have to live. And I think this is almost representation, government without representation. They're not here. They don't understand the uniqueness and the diverse neighborhood that Old Agoura is. I'm also wondering, how about the wildlife corridor? What is this going to do to our wildlife? We're inviting them into our neighborhoods because we have such a diverse ecosystem in our neighborhood. I myself have a lot, and 90% of my yard is California native with some rare plants on there. And if I put the ADUs that over there in mine, or I have a neighbor that's doing that to me, what's going to happen to my native species animals that are coming here? I'm also wondering about the lack of notice to the residents. I don't know if this is something that all of the residents know about, and does this affect the other cities? Does this affect not only Old Agoura? Is Morrison going to be doing this? Or is this just us? Are we just that lucky? Anyway, thank you very much.
Thank you for your comments. Appreciate it.
Our next speaker is Daniel Farkash.
It's on. It works.
You got it.
Hey, guys. Daniel Farkash, resident Old Agoura Driver Avenue. It's good to be back. It's good to see you guys. Robbie, Denise, great job on the presentation. There's a lot of work that goes into this. Most of you know I'm a contractor. I do this for a living as far as development and development standards. And I come up here with a little bit of technical expertise. So before we get into that, I want to make one comment. Deborah Lopez, you asked whether or not there's been any request under SB 9 as of yet. Yeah, in Old Agoura, there has been several SB 9 ADUs already gone in, and properties that were once horse-friendly are no longer horse-friendly. There's been a lack of consideration even before these new adopted, potentially adopted ordinances that you guys want to take on have adversely affected the property. So yeah, that's there. I know that the state is breathing down our backs, and I know that we have an obligation, but we also have an obligation for safety in our community. There were many items listed on that very fine presentation that I could not capture within a 3-minute time frame. So rather than come up here and tell you that I don't want it, which I don't want it, I'm offering some services. I'm offering to do something that I started 4 years ago and have presented to council people, to our mayors, some documentation that would help mitigate some of these mandates that we're going through, something that would help preserve Old Agoura. It had to do with restriction of FAR, floor area ratio. It had to do with setbacks. It had to do with lot coverage. And none of that has gone anywhere in 4 years. We've had COVID come in. That was an excuse. That has come and gone. And still there's been no consideration for these guidelines which I put forth, which would help preserve Old Agoura. Good example. This has just been on the books for a while. 6-foot fencing, and there was some talk about fencing on these new standards that we're looking at. There's no permit required for somebody that wants to put up a 6-foot fence. None. You don't need to go to planning. You don't need to go to building department. You want to build a 6-foot fence, you can. Yet, it says in Old Agoura you have to have an open 3-rail. You have to have something that's of the ambience of Old Agoura. And there are constantly 6-foot fences going up. So I'm using this as just an example of how you guys moving ahead and trying to adopt this mandate without proper going is not right. I would request that you guys, please, let's start a workshop. Let's put something together. Let us work together, and maybe we'll have to adopt this, but maybe in a different form. So my suggestion to you, please, do not just unanimously take this out tonight and say, yeah, we're done. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for your comments. Appreciate it.
We have no further speaker cards. However, I'll defer to staff for any remote participants. Amber?
Thank you, Mayor Anstead. No hands are raised to speak on this item.
Thank you. Before closing the public hearing, do any council members have any further questions of staff? Any council members have? I think I do. I mean, I think I want to try to bring it up now instead of trying to bring it up later in the deliberations. I guess one of the questions, Robbie, that I have for you is there, on the objective standards, is there anything concerning the emergency routes that we can add in, or talk to me about anything that we could do, or Denise, about trying to make sure that we have proper evacuation routes as we increase density into these areas.
Denise Thomas, Community Development Director. We have adopted, since the housing element was adopted, our emergency evacuation plan. And we also have a partnership with LA County, which allows us to be a partner in a program that would model whatever incident were to happen, be it an earthquake, be it a fire, and they can identify which intersections need to be, what lights need to be extended, what intersections need to be changed to counterflow. We also have bollards throughout Old Agoura that have access, in Old Agoura that have access routes out. So there's secondary routes that people can take in the event of an emergency. The emergency evacuation plan is on our website, has been for a while. It got adopted about 2 months ago, 2 or 3 months ago, I believe it got adopted, and it's on our website. And those are the tools we would use to address emergency evacuation. And a lot of that was born from the Woolsey After Action report. So a lot of the information that we learned from Woolsey was used to help draft that new plan.
Okay. Thank you for those comments on that. The other big question I guess I have about our discussion today and adopting this ordinance, if we adopt it, can we still go back and amend it later if we have more input from the community and want to add to the objective standards?
Yes, all of the ordinances that you adopt, none of them are always and forever. You always have an opportunity to amend them if you wish to. How you choose to amend them, since it's unknown, I caution you that whatever we attempt to do, we want to be consistent with the Housing Accountability Act. But yes, you can go back and amend it.
Okay, that's good. That's good to know. Trying to think if there's another specific. I think that's good for me for right now. Anybody else have any additional questions? Okay, Councilmember Wolf.
So for clarification, the reason why this is coming up now and we're looking to adopt this amendment is because there currently is nothing in the books so anything kind of goes. And this is us exerting the little bit of local control we have left. Is that why we're doing this right now?
Yes, that's a fair assessment.
And, yeah, okay.
Any other questions? Okay. There'll be no further questions. I will now close the public hearing. Before we move on to deliberations, I'll ask again, does any council member have any further comments? Okay. We'll now move on to deliberations. Councilmember Lopez, do you want to start us out?
Sure. I just want to address the questions that Tara Farkash had, and the answer is yes, this is already in place. The ship has sailed. The SB 9 was voted in by the California legislature, and I do want to note that almost pretty much all of our local legislators, Henry Stern when he was representing us, Richard Bloom when he was representing us, they all voted no on SB 9. Because they do understand the predicament that we are in, and we don't have the density ease that Northern California does in terms of public transit and things like that. So we tried our best. We lobbied hard on SB 9, when it was going through the legislature, and we won in the sense that our legislators listened to us and voted no, but ultimately they were overruled. So so it is in place, and you know, to Councilmember Wolf's point, if we do not do this tonight, then anything goes, and so it's we lose control of, you know, the flag lots, the design standards, the parking requirement, the sewage issues, and equestrian, oak tree, hillside ordinances. All of those just go by the wayside. So I just want to make it clear to the public that we're not caving when it comes to this SB 9. We're actually doing everything we can to keep the character of our city intact, and frankly, keep the safety of our residents intact. I mean, this is all back to the same issue that the state makes us, you know, implement all these mandates and gives us absolutely zero funding for infrastructure upgrades, things like that. So I want to thank the staff for going over this with probably each one of us. I mean, Jeremy and I, Councilmember Wolf and I went through it for quite a while with the land use committee, and I just want to say things like the graphics are so helpful. We're all laymen and women. We're doing the best we can, but I don't see how adopting this hurts us. It only helps the implementation of something that's already in existence. So with that, I'm ready to move forward and interested to see what my fellow council members have to add.
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem Buckley Weaver.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm fighting mad, and everybody, the city manager, the staff, the city attorney, anybody who would listen to me in the last week heard my wrath, because I am just, it's not just Senate Bill 9, it's everything. And believe it or not, there's housing bills going through the system right now that are going to even make it worse than this. So the state is basically saying, we're going to change the character of your city, whether you like it or not. Senate Bill 9 is changing the character of our city. And although we can have objective standards and we can do everything that we can do, we still can't stop somebody from taking out a heritage oak tree of over 100 years old if it's the only way that they can put in an 800 square foot structure. And that's just heartbreaking to me. And I just hate it. But in my wrath to everybody, this is our fight. This is the little bitty, littlest of tiniest things that we as a council can do, is to pass this ordinance and just have a workshop and see if we can improve it down the road. But every time somebody tries to be creative on our side, they just knock us down. And the developers just come in and they're just, you know, they're winning the war. And there's just so little that we can do. But by having no ordinance at all, they don't even have to, even if they have room for horse keeping property, they don't have to put it in. Even if they don't, you know, don't have room for parking, they don't have to put it in. Even with the roof line, the design elements, any of that, if we don't have something on the books and quick, and so there is 0 applications today, but until this gets through the process, there could be applications tomorrow or the next day. We need to have something on the books. We did the same thing with the ADUs. We tried our best. We were in the beginning of COVID, and we were scrambling with our temporary ADU ordinance because we wanted to make sure something was on the books, something with objective standards, something that we could do so that people couldn't. And you wouldn't believe, right in the beginning of COVID, middle of COVID, people were applying for ADU permit. It was just, you know, very telling. And again, we have done the very little that we can do for ADU development. And, you know, a very wise woman told me that we needed to get a busload of residents to go up to Sacramento and protest in front of the State House. And maybe then we can get them to listen to us. Like Councilmember Lopez said, we did that. Well, we didn't need a bus, but we drove Assemblymember Bloom and Senator Henry Stern absolutely crazy with that they had to vote no on Senate Bill 9. And it wasn't just us, it was Calabasas, it was Hidden Hills, it was, we were all, we worked really hard to fight Senate Bill 9, and, they listened, which is wonderful, but their colleagues did not. So here we are, and I'm still so angry. And I know what's coming down the pike with more housing bills. That's even going to make it worse for us in Agoura Hills. And in Senate Bill 9, there is nothing about these units being affordable. So there you go. We can put up all these units, charge as much money as we want, and we're going to be faced with more housing units. Give it a couple of years, there'll be a 7th cycle that'll say, come on, Agoura Hills, you didn't meet your 315, so now we're going to move you up to 500 units of affordable housing. But they've allowed Senate Bill 9 to have no talk about affordability. I know it'll increase inventory, but it doesn't increase affordable inventory. So I just find it very discouraging. But thanks to Robbie and Denise, at least and I don't mean at least because I know they've spent months and months and months on this, come up with something, some little bit of, something that they can tell people, sorry, you can't do that. You have to do this. And believe me, they're going to hear about it. People are not going to like it, that we have some objective standards that we can apply. But, that's our fight. That's all we can do right now. So I definitely encourage our residents to be talking to our electeds. We have new electeds, Jackie Irwin and Senator Ben Allen, and I would suggest that everybody be in touch with them as well, because there are more housing bills that have already passed one chamber or the other, and they're coming to the governor's office, and he has indicated he will sign them. So we're going to be back here in another year with more issues like this. So I'm ready to move forward on this.
Thank you. Councilmember Sylvester.
Well, I can't put it as eloquently as you did, Elise, but I agree with everything you've said and Deborah has said. I mean, we would not be doing this if we had an option, but we don't have an option because SB 9 is already in place and people right now can do anything they want. So at least we can put in a few restrictions and controls. And the other thing is to hope that our residents in Old Agoura who own the properties won't do it. So those that value where they live, we've all got to live together and act together and try and protect our community as much as we can in the ways that we can. But unfortunately, right now we've got to hold our noses because we don't have a choice. So unfortunately, I will move forward tonight too. But I understand everything you're saying and I agree with it 100%. So thank you for being here.
Thank you for those comments. Councilmember
I
Wall.
want to start off by, I appreciate the legislative history that was given, and I worked for Henry during this time, and this was by the pro tem of the Senate. This wasn't by any senator. This is the leader of the Senate. So that added extra pressure. And not only did we vote no, but we fought like heck, I'll say on the dais, to get the very high fire severity zones excluded. And that was almost a non-starter. We got laughed out of rooms for that. And so what we have is a one-size-fits-all policy that works really well in high transit areas with this broad stroke throughout the entire state of California. And there's not a lot we can do, and this is in response to us, the state not building enough housing, but this is not really the solution for the type of housing that they're looking for. I do also want to add that Senator Ben Allen and Assemblymember Irwin, who are now our members, voted no as well. So we did a good job regionally because here in the Santa Monica Mountains in LA County, the most disaster-prone county in the nation, they understood that this that wouldn't work, but here we are. So that's, you know, the historical component. And right now, we have nothing in the books to protect us. I mean, this is the law. So I don't see a downside for approving this right now and then working to hold workshops to address some of these issues. I mean, I think this gives us a little tiny, minuscule amount of local control. I mean, I get elected to a city council where I, of no fault of the council or the city, but for state legislation, we have less and less authority, starting with the ADUs that were mentioned earlier. That's ministerial by right. Now this is ministerial by right. So again, the reason I'm going to be moving forward with this is because we are able to flex a little bit of our local control. And as Mayor Pro Tem Buckley Weber said, we're going to get pushback from this, from folks saying that these objective standards are getting in the way of increasing our housing inventory. And we're going to get pushback for this, but this is the least we can do for our residents to protect our extremely unique character while we have it. So I'm going to be able to move forward with this to provide us some semblance of local control.
Thank you, Councilmember Wolf. And thank you for everybody for their comments. I think I'm basically right in line with everybody else. My comments are very similar. I appreciate the work by the city staff on the great presentation, also on creating these objective standards that we've put forward. And I think everything can always be improved, and it'd be great to have more community involvement and input. And so I look forward to being present at one of the community events to try to get input more from some of the different neighborhoods here in Agoura Hills going forward. So I think that's important, definitely. To do that. But I think we also need to pass what we can now and then kind of go back at it with what we think we can add to it going forward. Because I would hate not to have these objective standards in place whenever somebody does seek to split their lot using SB 9. So I definitely want to move forward and make sure that at least those at a minimum are in place. So I will now call for a motion and a second.
Can I just add one
Sure.
more comment? Because I'm sitting here stewing. Because you, Councilmember Wolf, you just reminded me about the very high fire severity zone. We have them telling us we have to cut down our trees and we've got to clean our forest and all this kind of stuff because we're in the very high fire severity zone. And then they turn right around and say you have to have more housing, more housing, more housing, more structures. That's all combustible. And it's just, I remember that. We literally got laughed out of the room. We thought, I remember Councilmember Lopez, you were there too. It was like, they wouldn't even listen to us. It was like, oh, no, the very high fire severity zone will not be exempt from Senate Bill 9. So thanks for reminding me.
Okay, any other comments before we move on? Okay. I will now call for a motion and a second to waive full reading and introduce ordinance number 23-471. Do I have a motion?
This is Councilmember Wolf, and I'll make the motion.
Okay, I appreciate it. Do I have a second?
Councilmember Sylvester will second.
Thank you very much. I'll now call for a roll call vote by the city clerk.
Councilmember Lopez?
Aye.
Councilmember Sylvester?
Aye.
Councilmember Wolf?
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Buckley Weber?
Aye.
Mayor Anstead?
Aye.
Mayor Anstead, you have approval, 5-0.
Thank you. We're now going to move to discussion item number 16. Our next item is discussion to consider contract renewal with the Greater Conejo Valley Chamber of Commerce. I will now defer to Assistant City Manager Ramiro Adeva for the staff presentation.
Yes, hi, good evening. Good evening, Honorable Mayor and council members. This item is to discuss the potential contract renewal for the Greater Conejo Valley Chamber of Commerce. As you're well aware, the contract will expire on June 30th of this year, which is why we're here tonight. You know, the city and the chamber began working together back all the way to about 2010, so that's over a decade of working collaboratively together. Throughout the course of the contract, the chamber has been an advocate for the business community in Agoura Hills, And in a moment, I'll pass the presentation to Chamber President CEO Danielle Borgia, who will highlight some of the work they do and the services they provide for the city. I would like to note that the Chamber is requesting 2 specific changes to the contract as follows. First, they are requesting a 2.5% increase from $78,000 to $80,000 per year. And second is a request to remove the language in the agreement that prohibits the Chamber from supporting candidates seeking political office within Agoura Hills. So on June 15th, the LUEDC, consisting of Councilmember Lopez and Councilmember Wolf, met to discuss this matter. In addition to them and any community members that might have attended, additional attendees included City Manager Hamburger, myself, and Chamber President CEO Danielle Borgia. I'm sure the committee can definitely speak for themselves and they'd be happy to share their feedback, but in summary, they had no problem with the 2.5% increase request, but did express concern over the Chamber's request to remove the language prohibiting the support of candidates running for political office within Agoura Hills, and they were interested to hear the feedback from the entire council tonight. And with that, I'm going to pass the presentation over to the President and CEO of the Chamber, Danielle Borgia.
Thank you, Ramiro. Good evening, Mayor Anstead and Council. I appreciate you giving me a couple minutes to highlight some of our accomplishments from the last contract cycle. I will get through this quickly. I just wanted to remind everyone of our mission. So, we promote the economic success of our members, but also businesses across our Conejo Valley region. And we really do that through 3 avenues: leadership, advocacy, and programming. And just to remind everyone, we are 5-star accredited by the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, which puts us in the top 1% of chambers nationwide. This is the current board members that represent the Agoura Hills area. I just wanted to show those for the record. We are required to have at least 3 board members that represent the city of Agoura Hills on our board of directors. A couple of specific pandemic relief support items. We obviously worked very hard as a chamber team during the pandemic to support our businesses across the board, small and large. And I just wanted to pull out these 4 points. We distributed small business grants directly from our foundation, and we also worked with the city on their grant program to connect businesses with those financial resources. We held a drive-through PPE supplies event for our businesses in LA County. We had over 170 nonprofits and small businesses participate in that event. We distributed about 300,000 face masks at that time, and as well as face shields when it was being required by LA County, mandated for our restaurants to have those in place. We did put a coalition together of over 100 businesses to request a variance from LA County that ended up getting approved, which leveled the playing field for the business practices that were currently in place for Ventura County at the time. We also advocated at the federal level for additional funding for our hospitality industries, specifically hotels and restaurants that were deeply impacted. They ended up getting a month extra of PPP funding that they were eligible for under the second round. These are some of our recent ribbon cuttings in the city of Agoura Hills. Some of you have been at these events. We were finally able to celebrate the grand opening of the Courtyard and Town Place Suites by Marriott that opened during 2020. We were recently at one of your new businesses, Howard's. We have AFC Urgent Care, a variety of different businesses that we've celebrated with their grand openings. We hosted a variety of different programs in 2021 and 2022 in the city of Agoura. We had our food and wine trail that replaced Taste of Conejo during that year, and we held one of our events there at Wizens Market Square. It was a great showcase of that center and all the tenants, really unique to this city that they really offer. We also hosted mixers at Oakmont of Agoura Hills after they opened, and Heavens Hill Estate. We talked a little bit about the Spotlight Breakfast series and the Chamber report. We started off the year with the State of the Chamber. In February, we had a Civic Leaders Breakfast with Mayor Anstead on our panel, as well as Supervisor Horvath. All 3 of our mayors and both of our supervisors participated in that panel discussion. And then in November, we have an event coming up where we're going to have a panel on education with our higher ed partners as well as K through 12. A couple of our signature events that I wanted to highlight that we have within our scope of work. This first one is not, but it was a job fair that we produced in 2021 and 2022. You can imagine that businesses were struggling to rehire talent after downsizing some of their teams, and it was a request that was coming to us from the business community, and so we put that job fair together both of those years to be able to connect employers with potential employees. In March, we hosted our regional economic forecast event at the Hyatt. We had our economic update, but then we also had a panel that highlighted housing, water, including the Pure Water Project, and then the growth of our biotech across the region with Westlake Village Bio Partners with Sean Harper. We had our recognition gala last month at the America's Teaching Zoo at Moore Park College. And I also highlighted a picture of Lyndon Northrup from 2021, where she was honored as Woman of the Year. We talked a little bit about our 40 Under 40 Awards during the Chamber report. This is our 8th annual event, and so this was last year's honorees, and looking forward to next month. We also talked about our Mixpo. These are pictures from last year, and we just held our most recent Mixpo earlier this month. We have Taste of Conejo, which is our large food and wine festival. This was held at the Hyatt. We had over 75 participants. It's a great way for us to showcase all the great dining, wine, beer in our region, and we had over 700 people that attended that event. And then, of course, our partnership with the city for State of the City Agoura Hills. Mayor Deborah Klein-Lopez at the time provided our keynote address, and it's a really great way to convene both community leaders and business leaders across the region to really showcase all the great work of the city during the year. We also, through our foundation, produced a Small Business Stories video series, and these were the 2 businesses that we specifically highlighted in Agoura Hills, Veterinary Angels Medical Center, as well as Foy Life. We felt like it's important. We talk a lot about small business and supporting them, but I think a lot of people don't really know the face behind a lot of these businesses that they might frequent or not frequent, and we really wanted to tell the story behind the business, and that helped us really do that. New in 2023, we created a program called Elevate Conejo Valley. This is really tailored for small businesses. It's a workshop development series, also tied in with individual consulting services offered through the EDC. So we have about 16 small businesses that are part of this first cohort, and they are experiencing topics, from legal, marketing, operations, all kinds of different areas that small businesses are looking for education on. And then we recently had our last cohort in Leadership Conejo, which we always partner with the City of Agoura Hills on for our kickoff session in September. We had 32 participants this year in our cohort and over 19 industries represented, so a really diverse group, and that program continues to grow as over the years. And then just wanted to highlight our state advocacy at the end, and I just want to put on the record that we did not support SB 9. We also believe in protecting the character of our single-family neighborhoods and are very focused on strategic infill development. But this is, much more recent. Obviously, we were just up in Sacramento in May. We accepted our 15th consecutive President's Circle Award from Cal Chamber, and while we were there, we met with Assemblymember Jackie Irwin and Senator Allen as well to discuss business issues that affect our region. And we just appreciate the partnership. I also have our chair of the board, Ed Sahakian, here with me this evening. He is the Chief Lending Officer for Ventura County Credit Union and the chair for this year. And we are certainly here to answer any questions that the council may have.
Thank you. Thank you for that great presentation as well. But before we move on to public comments, I'll ask if any council members have questions of staff or Danielle.
I have a couple of questions. So it's about the endorsement of candidates and how the chamber's going back. That is the chamber starting a PAC? Is that how or you're just
We
Like,
do-
how are you paying to get, staff to send out emails supporting it, supporting a candidate, or put on a debate or anything like that?
We do not intend to have a PAC at this time. We're not ruling out for the future, but we are not sending financial support to any of our candidates. We're simply endorsing, sharing our opinion for the candidates that we interview.
And so when you're sending out emails, social media, postcards, who's funding that?
Social media.
Well, for example, I mean, there's a staff member who's doing that, right? That's all chamber.
It is chamber.
Okay. Do you have any plans in the future of separating those out? So it'd be a completely separate arm of the chamber?
There has been discussion of, a PAC in the future.
Okay.
Potentially.
Thank you.
Councilmember.
Yes, I was just curious, why do you feel you need to have this in the contract?
We're actually asking to remove the language from the contract that's currently existing. Last year, ahead of the election cycle, we made the decision from a policy standpoint, directed by our board, that they would like the ability to endorse candidates in different races across the region. And we were very respectful of the fact that, we have specific language in our contract currently with Agoura that prohibits us from doing that. And so we, communicated that we would not be endorsing in Agoura due to our contract language. But now that we've gotten through this election cycle and the contract is up for renewal, we feel that it's fair across, our region to have the ability to endorse candidates. It doesn't mean that we will, but our endorsement committee will look at the different races during the election season to decide which ones we would consider endorsements in. And we're really looking to have that policy, as an equal level playing field across the region. We did endorse in the City of Thousand Oaks Council race as well as the Ventura County Supervisor race this last cycle, but we did not endorse in Westlake and Agoura.
So you're just requesting to endorse candidates?
Correct. The ability to endorse candidates, yes.
Right. So then that would make the playing field, I mean, we're a very small community in Agoura. That would make it sort of unlevel for the candidates if some were and some weren't endorsed. So, I'm a little wary about that because we try to be non-political. We're just here to support our community, and hopefully everybody, all the candidates are here to do that. So I'm a little ambivalent about selecting certain people. I just want to know why you wanted to get into the politics of it.
I think we saw through COVID how important, many of these elected positions are and impact our businesses. And we are the only business organization in the Conejo Valley. And so if we aren't speaking on behalf of the business community, they honestly aren't being represented during the election season. And so that's why the board felt so strongly, and Ed, you're welcome to add to this, but that was really, why this policy came about last year is our businesses are highly impacted by the decisions that our elected officials make. And we've seen that through COVID. And we feel like, just endorsing, it's basically sharing our opinion. We think this person would be a business-friendly candidate that would represent our businesses well for our community. We don't have a PAC. We're not, funding candidates with, thousands of dollars and backfill funding for their campaigns. We're simply trying to share our opinions, and having the ability to do that, I think, is really the biggest piece.
So you would be endorsing candidates on their previous track record?
primarily, but there are new, candidates
that's
that
what I was
don't
gonna
necessarily
say.
have a track record.
Yeah, exactly. So what would the process be? Would you be interviewing them or?
We do. We have a written questionnaire that we ask. We wait till the closing deadline, so we know everyone that is running for office, and then we send out a written questionnaire that then they have the opportunity, and anyone who submits a written questionnaire then is scheduled with an interview with our endorsement committee, and they all have the opportunity to get asked the same questions, and then at the end we ask them if there's anything we haven't covered that they would like to make sure that the committee is aware of. all of the candidates that we endorsed in this past cycle, they all had, voting records. So they did not choose to endorse any candidates that did not have, it's very easy during election season to say something you might do, but the committee felt strongly that, especially, this first time around, they wanted to make sure that there was proven records of how, these candidates align from a voting standpoint.
Right, so if a candidate doesn't have a proven record, then it would just be a character judgment on your part.
We are asking them specifically, what their policy platforms are on certain topics that are based on our legislative agenda that the board approves every year from the board of directors.
And people can say anything they want.
People can say anything they want, but it is, we do have them submit it in writing and attest to, there's so many circumstances that may arise, but we're looking for more of a general picture. We're not looking, there's obviously very specific policy decisions that come up that we could never even dream would come forward, right? So we're really looking for kind of the bigger picture from a candidate standpoint, and are asking them about some specific policies that align with our legislative agenda.
And how long has this policy been in place? Sorry, because I don't know the history.
We adopted it mid-2022, after the primary.
But previously, in our contract with you, have we ever had an issue about candidates and being anti-business or?
Well, this, this language has always been in place since we've had a contract with the city, I believe, to, prohibit the ability. So I don't think there has been a lot of
When did we first have a contract?
It's well over 10 years ago, but this language is the exact language that existed in the original agreement.
Right, so we've always had this in
Correct.
place.
It's been consistent.
That's what I want to know. Okay, thank you very much.
And I will say that we did not have that language in Thousand Oaks, and that's what gave us the ability to go ahead and endorse in that city. And their council has actually, we just had our contract approved by the city of Thousand Oaks, and everyone on the dais in regards to the dialogue was, supportive of the chamber having the ability to, make their policies, handle their political action as they see fit, but they really wanted to focus on the scope of work that the city, that the chamber provided from the city standpoint, and make sure that was in alignment with what the council's wishes were.
Thank you. Councilmember Wolf, do you have any questions?
I do not have any questions. I sat in the committee and I had my opportunity to answer, get my questions answered.
Councilmember Lopez.
Thank you. It's my understanding that the Thousand Oaks City Council meeting was not particularly overly supported, and that it was a kind of contentious 3-2 vote to leave that language. Isn't that right?
No, the 3-2 vote was in regards to two specific items within the scope. One that was brought forward was the candidates forum that we have typically held in Thousand Oaks. They didn't have an issue with our chamber hosting a candidates forum. There was just a couple of council members that felt like maybe it should not be a city-directed scope within our contract. And then one of the other issues that was raised with our legislative roundtable, one of the council had requested that there was consideration of sharing both sides of an issue when something was presented to that roundtable. That was an accommodation I did not favor at the council meeting, because we are a business organization, and when we take positions on items from a board direction, we are sharing with our members why we took this position. It's not necessarily our job as a Chamber of Commerce to show both sides of an issue. But the 3-2 vote was in regards to the candidates forum wanting to be removed by 2 council members, and I was agreeable to removing it from the contract, but 3 of the council members felt strongly that it should remain.
So all 5 of them agreed that you could have language in to endorse? Because that's not what I understood from one of the council members.
They did not have any language precluding endorsement, and none of the council members provided dialogue around the fact that we should not be endorsing.
Sorry, my dog takes this moment to go nuts with someone.
Has an opinion as
at the
well.
window. What about Westlake Village?
Westlake Village, we are still in contract renewal discussions, so that contract will be going forward to council expected next month.
And do you have any indication how they feel about removing this language, or do they have it in or out? I don't.
The situation is similar in Westlake. They also have the language precluding, and we are taking the exact same approach in that city, asking it for it to be removed.
Okay, and just to be clear, we got a couple of emails from businesses in Agoura Hills that made it sound like we would not be renewing a contract with you, which is not the case. I just want to make it clear, it's our contract for you to sign, correct? And if we agree to the price increase, which at least our committee had no problem with, and we leave the language that's in there, it's not really us not agreeing to sign a contract, it would be you and your board, is that right?
Well, the request is to remove the language. That is our current proposal for the council.
And if we don't remove that language, what happens?
That's what we're here to discuss today.
Okay, thank you.
So I think I'm the only one left that hasn't asked any questions, so I'll follow that up. So I think the question is the rationale that you're giving us, from what I gather from your presentation, is that you're trying to be consistent across all the cities, and that's why you want us to all adopt it in order to be consistent?
Yes.
That's the number one reason?
Yes, I think that's only fair.
Okay. But you still, I mean, I think Councilmember Lopez brings up a good point. Is she saying if we don't approve the language, are we still going to be, is that going to knock us out of this contract? I mean, is that basically a non-starter for you if we don't adopt that language?
The current board direction is, the request to strike that in order to renew the contract. This is, me speaking on behalf of the board, and Ed can, if you want to jump in.
Thank you. Good evening, council members. I'm the chair, and our desire is to have this contract go forward. We've been working with the city for years and years. We provide services to the city. Our formal charter and everything that we do focuses on advocacy for our businesses. Our members who are business members in your community, in Thousand Oaks, in Agoura Hills, in Westlake Village, all of them. Our members have spoken to us and said it's important to them for us to have our independence. And that is a key piece here, is our independence. For us to be dictated that we cannot endorse is not acceptable to for our board of directors. We had a conversation on it again recently, right before we came to this, to make sure that, is this the will of the membership? And we do believe that is the case. It's important for us because of the fact that we are looking to support and endorse candidates that will support our businesses. That is key and critical. That is part of our advocacy. And so therefore, as we look at our contracts with our cities, we look at the support services that we provide to the cities. Our job is not to be advocates for the city specifically. Our job is to be advocates for our business community, those folks that generate revenue for our cities. So I think that's kind of the case. That's what we've looked at, and that's why we're looking to open this up so that we can provide that support to our businesses across all of our communities.
Okay, thank you. I think you guys presented your position. So thank you very much. I appreciate it, and I think we'll move forward with public comments.
I have one more question.
One more.
If
Go
you
ahead.
don't mind.
Go ahead, Councilmember Lopez.
Obviously, you have all political stripes of business owners. And so I find it a little hard to believe that the groups are coming to you asking for this, but I'll believe you on that. But let me ask you about something in particular. You put up a picture of Linda Northrup. in your presentation. And standing right next to Linda Northrup were the prior Women of the Year, and standing right next to her was Claudia Bill de la Peña, who was running for supervisor in the last election. So clearly, you felt that Claudia Bill de la Peña was a pro-business person, so much so that you actually gave her Woman of the Year, and yet you didn't endorse her. You endorsed someone who had never run for that. Claudia had not either, but you know, how do you reconcile that? It seems to me that there was an agenda there. What is your process? If she was amazing enough to be not just a great supporter, but Woman of the Year, why did you get into that race? Did you get to endorse that race and not pick her?
Yeah, I think, you know, our Woman of the Year recognition at our gala every year, that is a very different category than endorsing a candidate. You know, this year we recognize Vanessa Bechtel from the Ventura County Community Foundation for her great work, you know, providing assistance after Woolsey Fire and after our borderline tragedy in our community. There are a variety of different reasons why the board selects different honorees for Woman of the Year. It does not you know, mean that automatically provides them an endorsement from the chamber for an office that they're running for.
I'm not saying automatic, but clearly she's pro-business for you to pick her for that role. You don't pick people based on their, you know, volunteerism or this or that. You pick them because of their business support.
And community support and other factors. You know, I don't know the political alignment of Vanessa Bechtel, but you know, it would be a very different conversation with deciding if we should honor her as Woman of the Year versus if we should be endorsing her for a political office. I think those two things are extremely separate. And again, we're looking at, you know, voting records and the issues that are important to us as, you know, the chamber. And I will tell you in regards to, you know, our members asking, we survey our members every year, and you know, one of the highest priorities is for us to represent the, you know, interests of business with local government. And it consistently showed that over 70% of the members surveyed would have liked to see us endorse candidates. And that was kind of, you know, cycle after cycle that showed. That's obviously not our whole membership, that's a portion of our membership, but I think, you know, over 70% on an annual basis asking us to do something as an organization does show that our members support this direction from a policy standpoint.
But it's not true that they have no representation. I mean, you've got the California Restaurants Association, which is one of the most powerful lobbies in the state. And they went up against, for example, the Los Angeles Department of Health, which is not an elected office. I mean, they report to the Board of Supervisors, but you know, they went up against the Department of Health, who's appointed, and lost that lawsuit. So, you know, there is representation for them. They're not out there alone. There are plenty of business groups that already advocate for them successfully or unsuccessfully.
Not at a local level with the cities we represent, however, when we're talking about city council.
So, but some of your examples were things that the city doesn't have purview over.
What examples are you referring to?
Well, I mean, you brought up COVID and you know, shutting down restaurants and things like that. I mean, we don't have that purview.
No, we understand that.
Public health.
We understand
directed.
That. Yeah. That's, I think, one of the sticking points, right? When people are mad at the wrong person. No one, I think there was a lot of confusion during COVID just from an overall public standpoint. We are very aware of the different roles that our different elected bodies play. And so these are, you know, just like we endorsed in the supervisor race, so we felt that was important on Ventura County side. So
what would be an example of something in Agoura Hills that is in our purview that you would want to weigh in on? And then, you know, if you endorse a candidate, like, aren't you getting into a little quid pro quo there where it's like, oh, you endorsed me, but now you're asking me to vote in a certain way? I mean, what's an example of that? How would that play out?
I mean, our contract for services are just that, they are services. And so I think that has to be separated out from issues that come before the council. I mean,
I agree that they should be separated.
housing is one of our top priorities as a chamber. We've done a lot of advocacy work in the city of Thousand Oaks on a variety of projects. And so that is something that we're looking very closely at as we move forward with our cities.
Thank you.
Actually, I'll finish up just with one more question.
Yeah.
When you are looking at the different candidates, did you have a board that interviewed them? And how many people was on the board? And would there be, I mean, it's not the whole Chamber of Commerce board, I take it, it's a small group.
Yeah, it's a board elected endorsement committee, so there are a certain amount of board members required, and then we are also they are able to appoint people from our general membership as well. And it's 9 people. There is a 70% vote required to endorse any candidate, so it's just not a majority. We are really looking for alignment from that committee, on people that they really feel that they are able to support. And in Thousand Oaks, for example, there were 3 seats open for endorsement. We only ended up endorsing 2 candidates in that race because we felt like those were the 2 that the committee felt comfortable, and that, they really had that proven track record of supporting business, and decided just not to endorse in the 3rd seat altogether.
Okay, and would on that 9-member board that's interviewing, is it guaranteed that one person's going to be, or at least minimum of one is going to be from the Agoura Hills, like you just put up a slide with the
Yes.
Agoura Hills representative?
Certainly, we did not do that this cycle because we knew we were not going to endorse in Westlake or Agoura because we were not permitted to do that. We would certainly make sure that there was, and some of these companies are a little more regional in nature as well, and so, but we would definitely make sure that there is specific representation for Agoura Hills if we're considering those races.
All right, so just so I'm totally, and everybody here is understanding the process a little bit, is that you do an interview with a 9-member board.
Written questionnaire first.
Okay.
Then we schedule an interview in person with the endorsement committee. We ask them all the same questions. Much of them are aligned with some of the written questionnaire, questions that were asked. And then we leave an open-ended question, or this is how we did it last time at the end, if there was anything that they wanted to add that the endorsement committee should be aware of when they're considering their decision.
Okay, and then that 9-member board makes a decision, and that's the decision, or does it go in front of the whole board of directors for them to then vote on what the recommendation is?
Currently, that is the decision, but it does go to the board to share the outcome of the committee before anything moves forward.
Okay, it's good to understand the process.
Yeah.
Mr. Mayor, I have
Yes,
another
yeah, go
question too.
ahead, no
Thank you.
problem.
So you said that 70% of your membership over the years has wanted the chamber to endorse. Do you give the slate of potential candidates to the general membership and let them weigh in on it?
We do not.
You do not. Okay. Is there a reason why you don't do that?
I think that, the people that we're appointing to the endorsement committee are, selected because they are very, politically active and know the, environment within Conejo Valley. And they are looking to make informed decisions that align with the beliefs of the chamber. That's really important. It's not about their personal beliefs with what different candidates should support what policies. Their job is to make sure that these potential endorsements are in line with what the chamber believes as an organization. And so I think it's important to make sure that that the board is making sure that the people that are making those decisions are very well informed and know the gravity of those decisions and the weight that they carry.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions before we move forward? Okay. Written public comments are requested to be emailed in advance of tonight's meeting. If you wish to speak, please click the raised hand button on the Zoom toolbar now. Public testimony is limited to 3 minutes per speaker, and a speaker's time may not be transferred to another speaker. We respectfully request that if you have something to distribute to the council, you hand it to our city clerk and do not approach the dais. I will now defer to the city clerk.
Thank you. Written public comments were received by email on or before the 4 p.m. deadline today and forwarded to the City Council prior to the meeting, and they will be part of the permanent record. Public comments were received from the following: Leon Alva, Agoura Hills, representing Change Escrow Incorporated. Ashley Losi, Agoura Hills, representing Homewood Suites by Hilton. Kim Cartino, Agoura Hills, representing Sheraton Agoura Hills. Peter Lee, Agoura Hills, representing Tavern Tomoko Ladyface Brewery. Jess Thomas, Agoura Hills, representing the Old Agoura homeowners. And Kathy Creech, Agoura Hills. We do not have any speaker cards for the chamber, so we'll defer to staff for any remote participants. Amber?
Thank you, Mayor Anstead. No hands are raised to speak on this item.
Thank you very much. Does any council member have any further questions or comments before we move forward? We'll now move on to deliberations. And Councilmember Lopez, I'll call on you today first as well on this one.
Before you get started.
Sorry, go ahead.
Ms. Rodriguez, did Jess Thomas weigh in on this issue? Because I did not see that.
I would think that would have been SB9, right?
I think it was the SB 9, but that's what I just want to make sure I've seen everything that's come through.
Give me one. I may have this back. My apologies, that was item 15.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to make sure that I didn't miss something.
Okay, thank you. We'll now move on to deliberations, and Councilmember Lopez, feel free to.
Okay, thank you. I want to share with you all what I shared with Danielle in the subcommittee meeting, which is that I absolutely love our relationship with the chamber. I think it has been so successful over the past 10 years. We, I think partner so well, and I can say especially last year when I was mayor, and I know Mayor Anstead is feeling this right now, and others will in the years to come. That's a particularly special time when you do the state of the city and your ribbon cutting and really supporting the members. And so I love the breakfasts, even though I can't always go to them. I have absolutely no complaints about the chamber, the tourism district. I could just go on and on, the monthly reports. I don't know why the chamber would want to jeopardize all that with something that is clearly controversial for us. I want to say that, I grew up here. I went to high school with some of the business owners here. And so, I know these owners personally. We were the first in the area to expand outdoor dining and operations during COVID, and it's something that we continue to do because we are listening to our businesses, and they want to keep that going. We visited every restaurant during COVID, and I so appreciate that the chamber was there to give PPE and support and grants to every business that asked, regardless of whether they were a member or not. And so that's why, it's very upsetting to get emails from some of the local businesses here, making it sound like we are not business friendly, because I think, we're over the top business friendly, and I think we've proven that. And so, to me, this is already politicized. I'm already getting emails from people saying that we are not supportive of businesses and the chamber. And it's like exactly what I would want to avoid, not encourage. We are supposed to be an unbiased body up here, and I'm already feeling like, okay, if I don't approve this language, am I going to be, penalized at the next election cycle? If I do approve this language, do I feel the pressure to, vote a certain way when you come before us? I think it's very, very dangerous to be going down this road when what has worked in the past has absolutely worked, and the things that a lot of our businesses were upset about were not within our local purview. So, I think it's already divided, how it's already affected how I feel about the chamber, and that makes me sad. I don't want a quid pro quo. I don't want to feel any pressure. And, you know, we've seen over the past few years, we've got very extreme people running for office. And to Councilmember Sylvester's point, they'll say anything. They don't have a track record. And so, you know, someone like me who does have a track record, it puts me in a very precarious spot. So I, you know, would like to see, I have no problem increasing the fees for, you know, cost of living or whatever, you know, you're asking. Again, I think you've done a great job, but we've had chambers that have gone down this road. Before you, we had a chamber that was extremely, extremely political and very divisive for the community. So my recommendation would be to approve the increase and to leave the language in so that that doesn't come back into the Agoura Hills environment. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Mayor Pro Tem Buckley-Weber.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. You know, we're elected here. It's a nonpartisan race, and we're expected to represent each and every resident and each and every business in the city of Agoura Hills. And I feel like when we've brought politics into it now, that not all of our businesses will be represented. Maybe more by their choice. They may decide they don't want to be part of our chamber because they don't like the chamber's politics. So I'm really sad to see that happening now. But I would be very disappointed if the chamber doesn't want to contract with the city of Agoura Hills, but I want to see the language stay in. And I have another big concern. It says in the contract that no such fund shall be used to promote religion or political activities. I have no problem and actually thank the chamber. They've done a fabulous job, and only raising it by 2.5% is, you know, commendable during a time when the cost of living is so high. But I need to be assured that none of our $80,000 is being used to promote political candidates. And in this last election cycle in 2022, I did not have that impression. I had the impression that there was a lot of commingling of who was sending out the emails, who was paying for the candidate, and maybe the chamber didn't use their chamber staff that perhaps our money's going to, but there was an appearance of impropriety, in my opinion, that there was an appearance that the city's dollars were being used to promote candidates in Ventura County and Thousand Oaks. And that is a big concern for me, which is why I asked, and I hope what the chamber will do is develop a PAC and have an independent arm that's going to do the endorsements with its own board, so there's just no questions. We all know that we have residents who love this kind of stuff, and they will come, I mean, I don't want to say names, but I already know people in this community who, you know, would want to see an audit. And how do we know that my dollars aren't being spent, you know, to endorse candidates here or there? And even keeping it out of Agoura Hills, there's the risk of our money being used to support candidates elsewhere. So my gut feeling is if I knew that you guys were going to separate this out, you guys meaning the chamber, if the chamber was going to separate it out, we could do some sort of an audit or something after the 2024 election, the 2025 contract renewal. It's a 2-year contract that we would be signing. And again, with the language staying the same, with the increase in the price is my view, that, you know, then we can look and see in 2025 when it's up for renewal again of whether or not we're comfortable that no city dollars were used, no staff salaries were paid. Again, these are our taxpayer dollars, and I'm not comfortable with using it for something that is political. So that's my view, but if the chamber's interested, you know, in setting up a PAC and doing it the way that other organizations do this so that it's completely independent, then I would be open to, you know, moving forward. I'm still up for moving forward. I just think that we have to be very careful. Part of the agreement is that no funds can be used for that. So I would need to have some sort of an audit in 2025 to see, and I'm using audit loosely, that none of Agoura Hills dollars were used in any way to support candidates, whether it would be in Agoura Hills or outside of Agoura Hills. So that's my position.
Thank you. I agree with my fellow council members. You've done a wonderful job promoting the businesses in our community, and we really appreciate that. And we recognize that we need you for that. And that's why I am going to support continuing the contract, but with the caveat that the language stays as is, because I think if there is a business that feels very strongly about a candidate, they are free to endorse that candidate. All the candidates have their endorsement pages on their websites. They can sign up, they can make a donation to the candidate, and their name can be there. But I don't think it's the Chamber's place to tell our residents who they are supporting, because we are just a small part of the Conejo Valley. And I would like our election to remain as, strife-free as possible. So that would be my decision. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Wolf.
So I have no problem renewing the contract and the 2% increase, but it is the striking of the language that I don't feel is appropriate in Agoura Hills. Our relationship with the chamber is so strong and so important, and I feel like this could jeopardize in certain situations. I appreciate all the work the chamber does and want to continue to work with them, but just getting involved in the political process, I feel like can get a little bit messy. But, and on the flip side, it is their prerogative to have a voice, and so I do understand where they're coming from and why this is coming forward. It makes sense. But sitting on this side, it's just not something that I feel comfortable with as a city council member looking at our relationship with the chamber. So I would propose to keep the language.
Okay, thank you very much. This is a tough issue, and I came into this meeting, I think, thinking that I didn't have really a big issue with you endorsing candidates, but I got to tell you, Mayor Pro Tem Buckley Weber kind of had a pretty good argument that she makes with the fact that if you're going to do this, it really should be not with the dollars that we're paying as a city, that it should be a separate fund, basically, that's kind of endorsing these candidates, because you don't want to be paying, our money wants to be used for events that you hold and all these other great things that you do, and not necessarily for a candidate, for a political candidate. And so it does seem like it should be separated. I kind of agree with that argument now that I see it in full context. So I got to agree. I'm totally in alignment as well with the increase to $80,000 for the contract, and I would also vote to exclude the language with the political thing going forward until it's kind of separate from the general fund. So that's kind of how I feel.
You mean to include it?
No, to exclude it.
Because they're asking to exclude it.
Oh, I'm sorry. No. Yes, so it would be
Keep it.
to keep the political language, to exclude endorsements, political endorsements.
Okay, thanks for that
That's what,
clarification.
you got it. And so I'll make sure I clarify that on the. So I'll now call for a motion and a second to approve the Greater Conejo Valley Chamber of Commerce with the increase to.
Can I just ask one clarification, Mr. Mayor? So before I know we're going to go through the motion, the vote, and just kind of reading what my notes are saying, it's going to look like I'm getting the impression that the 2.5% is going to be okay, but that there's still further discussion that might not align with what the chamber is proposing tonight. In the near term, the contract is going to expire on the 30th. So one thing that I'd like to propose the council to also consider while you make this motion is if maybe you'd be open to authorizing the city manager to continue discussions with the president of the chamber. And maybe there's a time frame, maybe a 3-month time frame or something that the two sides can kind of come together and understand what cost that might be, so that we're not just lacking in the services and we have no contract in place. I don't know what otherwise we just won't have a contract as of June 30th. So I'm not sure how the council feels about that, but that's an option I'd like the council to consider.
Well, I think I'm hearing consensus to renew the contract for the 80,000 and not strike the language. So then the second element, which the mayor and I threw out, was, before 2025 renewal, is that we need to take a hard look at how our dollars were used. I'm not, and making sure that our dollars in the 2024 election are not being used for that election, and they're only being used for the scope of good work that the chamber does. And if the chamber doesn't want to keep it separate, then I think, I want to give them the opportunity to do that. And if they don't want to do that, I would say, let's deal with it in the 2025 contract. I may not have articulated that well. I didn't mean to confuse the issues. But I think it's up to you guys, but I think that's what I'm hearing, is that everybody agrees to increase the contract price to 80,000 and keep the language as is.
But then, Mayor Pro Tem, on that note, then unless the chamber says something different, I'm not sure that they would sign the contract with the language still in. So then there wouldn't be the other side of the contract.
That would be their decision, right? It's like our consensus, it's our contract. It's not their contract. I looked at the contract from 2 years ago, and it's ours. And so it sounds like we've got consensus to increase the price and leave the language in, and we send that back to them. Now, if they want to sign it, they can sign it. If they want to extend it to give them more time to figure it out with maybe a pack or something, then to me, the burden is on them to figure this out. They're the ones that want this change. We're fine with the way it is. And so, I would make a motion to send the contract like it sounds like we're all in agreement with, to the chamber, and then it's really up to them if they want to come back to us with either an okay, or maybe we extend on a month to month while we figure this out with the existing language in place.
Sure, and we can do whatever, obviously, we'll do it what the will of the council is. I just only bring up the logistics of it, right? That the contract won't exist unless it's executed by both sides. So if they go back, that's fine, and, if there's no contract in place, then there's no contract in place, but then technically, we don't have those services. We don't have a contract that covers any services that they provide in the meantime while they're having those discussions. So if it's not 3 months, if it's a month, that was the only piece that I bring up. It's just because the other side to that puzzle is having the chamber also sign the contract. And so I think, yes, it sounds like the council is very clear and unified in what the council's proposal is, but then there's the other side of the piece that I was just trying to account for. So if the council wants to move forward with that, that's fine, and there doesn't need to be sort of that discussion between the city manager and the chamber, but then technically we won't have a contract in place after June 30th.
Now I get what you're saying. So the chamber may not even be able to address this issue by June 30th. And so,
I guess I'm fine with that. If I think that our proposal, we've all kind of agreed to, is the 2.5% increase, that our proposal for the contract is 2.5% increase, and leave the language prohibiting political endorsements. I think that's simple.
Right, and I'd say maybe, if the chamber, I don't know if, Danielle, you want to speak to this, but when's your next board meeting? Mid-July. So we would want to maybe extend the contract for 30 days so that they have an opportunity to vote one way or on the other? Or are we ready to say, take it or leave it? I don't think we,
I think we could extend if everybody's comfortable with that, just basically giving them 30 days to
take it to their board.
To take it to their board.
That's what you mean, right, Romero?
Yeah.
Okay.
So unfortunately, an extension to the existing agreement is not on the agenda. The only thing you have on the agenda is this new agreement. So I think one thing you could do is look at the scope of services and determine whether or not you need them to do these things that month. And it sounds like the council has inclined to make a decision, like this is how they want the agreement to look like. So that might dictate how you want to move forward, if you look at the scope.
I think from my standpoint, I'm fine moving forward with just what we propose and letting, whenever they sign, if they sign it or don't, then we can bring it back. We do have another meeting
August.
In mid-July, right? July 13th?
No.
July 12th, yes.
July 12th.
Okay.
So I think that.
So I think that Councilmember Lopez actually made a motion, but
Yep.
if she did, then I'll second that motion. I don't know.
Sure.
Yep, okay. I'll call for a roll call vote from that motion.
Councilmember Lopez?
Aye.
Councilmember Sylvester?
Aye.
Councilmember Wolf?
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Buckley Weber?
Aye.
Mayor Anstead?
Aye.
Mayor Anstead, you have approval 5-0.
Thank you very much. We're going to move on to our next item. Our next item is to receive an update on the involuntary deputy rotation plan and discussion to consider approval of a letter of concern. I will now defer to Assistant City Manager Ramiro Deva for the staff presentation.
Thank you. Long time no talk. Okay, so this item, Honorable Mayor and council members, this item is to consider a letter of concern to the involuntary deputy rotation plan. And as you recall, this item was actually brought before the council back in April. As a quick background for everyone, as we discussed back then, the deputy gangs and cliques within the LASD dates back as a problem that goes back decades, over 50 years, as outlined in a report that was prepared in February of 2023 by Special Counsel to the Sheriff's Civilian Oversight Commission. During that discussion, and as part of this discussion too, it's really focusing in again on the 27 recommendations of that Oversight Commission's report, and specifically the one recommendation for an involuntary rotation of deputies. At the meeting on April 26th of 2023, the item that we brought before the council at that time was for consideration of a letter of opposition. At that time, the council expressed some feedback that was not in line necessarily with that particular letter of opposition, and also the desire to have further feedback and clarification on a few additional points. And so the direction to the staff at the April 26th meeting was to redraft the letter and then to also do further research and get some clarifications and then come back to the council to report back, which is what we're doing now. So one of the updates that I want to give is in regards to the Board of Supervisors and an action that they took at their March 7th Board of Supervisor meeting. At that meeting, at the April 26th meeting of the council, there was comments made by the public during public comments about the Board of Supervisors taking an action, and the statement was that that action was a directive, that it was a mandate to Sheriff Luna to adopt all 27 recommendations, and implied that if he did not do so, that he would be in violation of their directive. In looking at what that March 7th Board of Supervisor action was, there were actually three parts to what they agreed to do. They first adopted the 27 recommendations, but then the second part to their approval was a request, and I specifically mentioned the word request because that was in the motion. It was a request for Sheriff Luna to review, adopt, and implement recommendations, and then they had a third part to that motion was to direct the county CEO and county council to support the sheriff in implementation of those measures. And so what staff did between April 26th meeting and now, we did reach out to Supervisor Horvath's office to get an idea as to whether our understanding of what we read in the board report was really a request, or was it more of a mandate to the sheriff? And what we were told was that they did take this action, but as far as they're concerned, it's out of their jurisdiction now and in the jurisdiction of the sheriff. And so it's Sheriff Luna's sole discretion to be able to pick which of those recommendations to implement in order to best solve this problem of deputy gangs and cliques. We also asked the question because I think one of the public comments that was mentioned at the April 26th meeting was a statement that the Board of Supervisors would need to have this item brought back to them and then have them formally take a motion of striking the involuntary deputy program recommendation. And again, from the supervisors, our supervisor, Supervisor Horvath's office, they explained that there is no plan in the near future to reconsider this item. Once again, they feel like their vote is done on this matter and that they've moved those recommendations over to where they need to be, which again is with Sheriff Luna, and he'll go ahead and make those decisions about what to implement. The second part to that was an update on Sheriff Luna. And so in speaking, actually, we got to speak with Sheriff Luna himself, and he too, his comments aligned with what we heard from the Board of Supervisors offices, or from Supervisor Horvath's office as well, which is that the sole authority to implement the recommendations at this point lies with him. He has received many letters of opposition from contract cities, and he's taking those all into consideration as he looks at the recommendations and decides which ones to implement and which ones not. We also reached out to our local Malibu Lost Hills station, spoke with Captain C2, got an update from her, and the general feeling is that the recommendation, that particular recommendation doesn't appear to be moving forward, but there is still no definitive answer that it won't move forward. But so that's just where it's at right now, but I think the general feeling, according to Captain C2, is that it will not be, it's not something that's going to be moving forward anytime soon. So what we did was, with those clarification points, we went back and looked at the comments received from the council in regard to that particular letter of opposition that was attached at the time of, back in April. And we're proposing now a letter of concern, which was attached to the staff report. Really what we feel this letter of concern will do is it's not going to be outright opposition of the deputy rotation program, but does express the concerns with the way that it currently is written. It also makes note of, we heard very clear from the council that they were not comfortable, that you all were not comfortable with a one-size-fits-all approach. There was concern about that this particular program as written would cause recruiting challenges for the Sheriff's Department. It also made mention of, encouraging the use of terminations, that by the report, and they talked about that as being an option that could be used when you have a bad seed that's causing this problem, you have the ability to terminate. And so there was discussion at the last council meeting about using that more to kind of weed out the bad deputies and keep the good ones. And then it was very clear, I think, unanimous across the council from what we heard in your feedback, that you did not want to rotate deputies at the Malibu Lost Hills Station. So what we attempted to do in the attached letter of concern is kind of group that all up and put it in the letter of concern and then bring it to you today for consideration. The recommendation is by no means exhaustive, but we've given kind of a, the two recommendations that we're putting and asking the council to consider is to either approve sending the letter of concern to Sheriff Luna along with any desired revisions from the council tonight, or if you choose to not send any letter at all, please direct staff to do so, and we will not send any letter to Sheriff Luna. So with that, that completes my report at this time, and I'd be happy to answer any of your questions.
Thank you very much. Before we move on to public comment, does any council member have questions of staff? Councilmember Sylvester.
I just have one question, because you did an excellent podcast with Sheriff Luna. And one of the things I noticed he kept stressing is that we are hiring him and the Sheriff's Department to do a job for us. So as the employees, we should be able to have a say in what we feel is best for our community. And I think it's important, if we all feel that this is something that we would not like to see at our sheriff's station, that we should express that opinion, that as we represent Agoura Hills and we're hiring you to take care of the security for our city, we would prefer not to see our deputies rotated out. Is that correct? Isn't that what he was sort of telling us? That we should let him know?
Correct, Councilmember Sylvester, and it's a great point. And I think that we try to outline that in the letter of concern, and it's also part of the reason why the letter of concern is attention to Sheriff Luna. The previous letter, you might remember from the April 26th meeting, was actually attention to Lindsay Horvath, Supervisor Horvath, excuse me. And but now we know appropriately the letter should be going to Sheriff Luna. So those concerns are in the letter of concern, and it's attention to Sheriff Luna.
Any other questions? Councilmember Lopez.
So this is allowing us to express our opinion about the rotation only without opposing the entire set of recommendations. Is that what you're saying? Because what we discussed last time is we definitely don't want to undermine the progress of getting rid of deputy gangs. So am I understanding that correctly?
That's correct, Councilmember Lopez.
Okay, and to clarify, is it Luna or is it Captain C2 that would have the ability to rotate around? It's Luna, right?
That's correct. It's Luna.
Okay, but Captain C2 opposes that recommendation?
Correct.
To be able to rotate. Okay. Thank
Correct.
And if I can just add, under the recommendations by that council, that would be mandatory, that all deputies would be rotated every 5 years. So I think that's where the hiccup is.
Okay. Any other questions? All right, written public comments were requested to be emailed in advance of tonight's meeting. If you wish to speak, please click the raised hand button on the Zoom toolbar now. Public testimony is limited to 3 minutes per speaker, and a speaker's time may not be transferred to another speaker. We respectfully request that if you have something to distribute to the council, you hand it to our city clerk and do not approach the dais. I will now defer to the city clerk.
Thank you, Mayor Anstead. No written public comments have been received and no speaker cards have been submitted. We'll defer to city staff for remote participants.
Thank you, Mayor Anstead. No hands are raised to speak on this item.
Thank you very much. Does any council member have any further questions or comments before we move forward? Deliberations? All right, we'll now move on to deliberations, and I'll start the same way I've started all night. Councilmember Lopez, hope you're feeling better.
I'm fading fast. I'm fading fast. I'm going to let my other council members say things a little bit more eloquently than I am because I'm actually really fading, as I said, but I would be I would approve sending a letter just on this one issue, which I know is important to our captain and which the sheriff mentioned was in the podcast, which I encourage you all to watch. Within his purview. And the big thing for me, as I mentioned before, is that I don't want to undermine the real reform that has to happen, and I think this strikes a balance. Thank you.
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem Buckley-Weber.
Thank you. I really like the letter. I think staff did an excellent job on it. I think that it really comes across that staff listened to what our complaints were with it. I watched an incredible podcast, and I have full faith in Sheriff Luna, and he said exactly that. I mean, the question was asked about this, and he said, I'm going to review everything. I'm taking it seriously. On the same hand, I agree with Councilmember Sylvester that we need to send him a letter. He needs to hear from us and not just signing on to somebody else's letter. These are really our feelings and how our council feels, and I think it's important that he knows that we're watching, we care. We come across, Ramiro represents the nice part of us, but there's another side of us too. And so I think it's good that he knows that the city of Agoura Hills is, paying attention. And I think it does, basically we're telling him, that, we understand, it's up to him, but here's some of the issues that we have. And so I think you did a really good job on it, staff, Mr. Adema, whoever. But hey, I felt listened to for the first time of all the issues tonight. Thank you, Ramiro. But I think it says it all. So I'm willing to move forward and send the letter. And, obviously we're CCing, I believe, Captain C2. Oh, we're not. Do we want to send a copy to Captain C2? I think it might be nice. So she knows that, where we're coming from as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Sylvester.
Yes, I agree with my fellow council members. I think it's very important that we state our opinion on this one recommendation. We are not, we are trying to support as much as possible reforms that they're putting through, but this one would hurt our community, and we have to represent our community and tell them what services we want from them, and this is one of them, that we want to keep our deputies. So I'm fully in favor of an excellently written letter. Thank you.
Awesome. Councilmember Wolf.
Thank you. I echo my fellow council members. I think this letter, it's walking a tightrope, and it was done pretty well, and it really took in the consideration and the comments made by the council. I do appreciate the sensitivity because this is such a charged issue. The concept of sheriff gangs and cliques is something that's really on people's minds and it's really frightening. And so I don't want us to appear that that's not something that we care about or we're insensitive to. But I do have faith in our leadership with Sheriff Luna, and I think that this letter writes that, really articulates well our specific needs in Agoura Hills and the specific needs for the Malibu Lost Hills Station. And so I support moving forward with this, and I thank staff for taking in the comments from the council.
Excellent. Thank you very much for those comments. My comments are, I kind of dittoed a lot of the stuff that's been said already from the podium, but I think the most important thing to me is what's been proven that works in policing is community policing. And I feel like this totally destroys community policing by moving deputies every 5 years. The whole, what you want to try to create with policing is to have the police be in your community, be everybody, all the residents and everybody feel that they're a part of their local community and trust. You got to build that trust. And this totally destroys that to me because you have new people coming in all the time, and that's not what good policing to me looks like. So I'm in total agreement with the letter, ready to move forward. So I will now call for a motion and a second to approve sending Sheriff Luna the drafted letter and copying CCing Captain C2. Do I have a motion?
Councilmember Sylvester so moves.
Excellent. Do I have a second?
Mayor Pro Tem Buckley Weber seconds the motion.
Excellent. Now defer to the city clerk for a roll call vote.
Councilmember Lopez.
Aye.
Councilmember Sylvester.
Aye.
Councilmember Wolf.
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Buckley Weber.
Aye.
Mayor Anstead.
Aye.
Mayor Anstead, you have approval 5-0.
Excellent. Thank you. Are there any comments from staff as we end the evening here? Any comments from staff? Nobody? How about comments from city councilmen or women? Any?
You know, I'll just say, Mr. Mayor, after everything that went on tonight, I would encourage everybody to shop local, to support our local businesses and bring in money for next year's budget. So thank you.
You got it. Thank you for those comments. Any other comments?
Yeah, this was a really big meeting. We passed our budget and we discussed some really important issues, and thank the staff, of course, but I also want to thank the council. I think we work really well together on getting through and navigating these tough issues. So I appreciate our conversation and the work we're doing together.
You got it. Thank you. All right. The next regular city council meeting will be held at 6 p.m. on Wednesday, July 12th, 2023 in the council chambers of the Civic Center. It is anticipated that members of the public will have the opportunity to participate in person in the council chambers or by remote video conferencing Zoom. At this time, we will adjourn tonight's meeting. Will the maker of the motion and second to adjourn please state your names?
This is Councilmember Wolf, and I'll make a motion to adjourn tonight's meeting.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
Councilmember Sylvester seconds.
Excellent. I'll defer to the city clerk for a roll call vote.
Councilmember Lopez.
Aye.
Councilmember Sylvester.
Aye.
Councilmember Wolf.
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Buckley Weber.
Aye.
Mayor Anstead.
Aye.
Mayor Anstead, you have approval 5-0.
Thank you very much. This meeting is now adjourned.
Feel better, Debbie?
Yeah.
Thank you.